a paper still untouched, and darting toward it, he seized it just as the flames were reaching it. The movement was so rapid that the ambassador could not prevent it, and the paper was in Du Bois's hands. "Pest!" said the prince, seeing Du Bois shaking his fingers. "I knew that the regent had skillful spies, but I did not know that they were brave enough to go in the fire." "My foi, prince," said Du Bois, unfolding the paper, "they are well rewarded for their bravery, see." The prince cast his eyes over the paper. I do not know what it contained, but I know that the prince turned pale as death, and that, as Du Bois burst out laughing, Celimare broke in pieces a little marble statue which was near his hand. "I am glad it was not I," said Du Bois coldly, and putting the paper in his pocket. "Every one in turn, monsieur. Heaven is just," said the ambassador. "Meanwhile," said Du Bois, "as we have got what we want and have not much time to lose today, we will set about affixing the seals." "The seals here!" cried the ambassador, exasperated. "With your permission," replied Du Bois. "Proceed, Monsieur Leblanc." Leblanc drew out from a bag bands and wax, all ready prepared. They began operations with the desk and the bureau. Then they advanced toward the door of my closet. "No," cried the prince, "I will not permit—" "Gentlemen," said Du Bois, opening the door and introducing into the room 2 officers of musketeers, "the ambassador of Spain is accused of high treason against the state. Have the kindness to accompany him to the carriage which is waiting, and take him, you know where. If he resists, call 8 men and take him by force." "Well, and what did the prince do then?" asked Brigod. "What you would have done in his place, I presume, my dear Abbé. He followed the 2 officers, and 5 minutes afterward your humble servant found himself under seal." "How the devil did you get out?" cried Harmental. "That is the beauty of it." Hardly was the prince gone, when Du Bois called the valet de chambre. "Were you called?" asked Du Bois. "Lapierre at your service, monseigneur." "My dear Leblanc," said Du Bois, "explain, if you please, to Monsieur Lapierre, what are the penalties for breaking seals?" "The galleys," replied Leblanc. "My dear Monsieur Lapierre," continued Du Bois in a mild tone, "you hear. If you like to spend a few years rowing on one of His Majesty's vessels, touch one of these seals, and the affair is done. If, on the contrary, 100 louis are agreeable to you, keep them faithfully, and in 3 days the money shall be given you." "I prefer the 100 louis," said the scoundrel. "Well, then, sign this paper. We constitute you guardian of the prince's cabinet." "I am at your orders, monseigneur," replied Lapierre, and he signed. "Now," said Du Bois, "you understand all the responsibility you have undertaken?" "Yes, monseigneur." "And submit to it?" "I do." "Now, Leblanc," said Du Bois, "we have nothing further to do here, and," added he, showing the paper which he had snatched from the fire, "I have all I wanted." And at these words he left, followed by Leblanc. Lapierre, as soon as he had seen them off, ran to the cabinet and exclaimed, "Quick, Baron, we must profit by our being alone for you to leave. Did you know I was here then, fellow?" "Pardieu, I should not have accepted the office of guardian if I had not. I saw you go in, and I thought you would not like to stay there for 3 days. And you were right, 100 louis for your good idea." "Mon Dieu, what are you doing?" cried Lapierre. "I am trying to get out." "Oh, not by the door. You would not send a poor fellow to the galleys. Besides, they have taken the key with them. And where am I to get out, then?" "Raise your head." "It is raised." "Look in the air." "I am looking." "To your right. Do you not see anything?" "Yes, a little window." "Well, get on a chair, on anything you find. It opens into the alcove. Let yourself slip now. You will fall on the bed. That is it. You have not hurt yourself, monsieur." "No. I hope the prince will have as comfortable a bed where they are taking him. And I hope monsieur will not forget the service I have rendered him." "Oh, the 100 louis? Well, as I do not want to part with money at this moment, take this ring. It is worth 300 pistoles. You gain 600 francs on the bargain. Monsieur is the most generous gentleman I know. Now tell me how I must go." "By this little staircase. You will find yourself in the pantry. You must then go through the kitchen into the garden and go out by the little door. Thanks for the itinerary. I followed the instructions of Monsieur Lapierre exactly, and here I am. And the prince, where is he? Asked the Chevalier. How do I know? In prison, probably. Diable, 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 said Brigod. Well, what do you say to my Odyssey, Abbé? I say that it would be very droll if it was not for that cursed paper which Du Bois picked out of cinders. Yes, said Valef, that spoils it. And you have not any idea what it could be? Not the least. But never mind, it is not lost. We shall know some day. At this moment, they heard someone coming up the staircase. The door opened and Boniface appeared. Pardon, Monsieur Raoul, said he, but it is not you I seek. It is Father Brigod. Never mind, my dear Boniface. You are welcome. Baron, allow me to present you to my predecessor in my room, the son of our worthy landlady and godson of the Abbé Brigod. Oh, you have friends barons, Monsieur Raoul. What an honor for our house. Well, said the Abbé, you were looking for me, you said. What do you want? I want nothing. It was my mother who sent for you. What does she want? Do you know? She wants to know why the Parliament is to assemble tomorrow. The Parliament assembled tomorrow, cried Valef and Darmental together. And how did your mother know? I told her. And how did you know? At the office. Maitre Jules was with the president when the order arrived. Well, tell your mother I will come to her directly. She will expect you. Adieu, Monsieur Raoul. And Monsieur Boniface went out, far from suspecting the effect he had produced on his listeners. It is some coup d'etat which is preparing, murmured Darmental. I will go to Madame de Maine to warn her, said Valef. And I to Pompadour for news, said Brigod. And I, said Darmental, remain here. If I am wanted, Abbé, you know where I am. But if you were not at home, Chevalier, oh, I should not be far off. Open a window, clap your hands, and I should come. Valef and Brigod went away together, and Darmental went back to Bathilde, whom he found very uneasy. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Buvat had not returned. It was the first time such a thing had ever happened. Chapter 34. Parliamentary Justice. The following day, about 7 o'clock in the morning, Brigod came to fetch Darmental, and found a young man ready and waiting. They both wrapped themselves in their cloaks, drew down their hats over their eyes, and proceeded to the Rue de Clery, the Place de Victors, and the garden of the Palais Royal. On reaching the Rue de Elichelle, they began to perceive an unusual stir. All the avenues leading toward the Tuileries were guarded by detachments of musketeers and light horse, and the people, expelled from the court and gardens of the Tuileries, crowded into the Place du Carrousel. Darmental and Brigod mixed with the mob. Having arrived at the place where the triumphal arch now stands, they were accosted by an officer of Grey Musketeers, wrapped in a large cloak like themselves. It was Valef. Well, Baron, asked Brigod, what news? Ah, it is you, Abbé, said Valef. We have been looking for you, Laval, Malesieux, and myself. I have just left them. They must be somewhere near. Let us stop here. It will not be long before they find us. Do you know anything yourself? No, nothing. I called at Malesieux's, but he had already gone out. Say that he was not yet come home. We remained at the arsenal all night. And no hostile demonstration has been made? Asked Darmental. None. Monsieur le Duc de Maine and Monsieur le Comte de Toulouse were summoned for the Regent's Council, which is to be held before the sitting of the Parliament. At 6:30 they were both at the Tuileries. So Madame de Maine, in order to get the news as soon as possible, has come and installed herself in her superintendent's apartments. Is it known what has become of the Prince de Cellamare? Asked Darmental. He is sent to Orleans, in a chaise and four, in the company of gentlemen of the king's household, and an escort of a dozen light horse. And is nothing known about the paper which Du Bois picked out of cinders? Asked Brigod. Nothing. What does Madame de Maine think? That he is brewing something against the legitimated princes, and that he will profit by this to take away some more of their privileges. This morning she lectured her husband sharply, and he promised to remain firm, but she does not rely upon him. And Monsieur de Toulouse? We saw him yesterday evening. But, you know, My dear Abbé, there is nothing to be done with his modesty, or rather his humility. He always thinks that they have done too much for him, and is ready to abandon to the regent anything that is asked of him. By the by, the king? Well, the king. Yes. How has he taken the arrest of his tutor? Do you not know? It seems that there was a compact between the marshal and Monsieur de Fréjus, that if one of them left His Majesty, the other should leave immediately. Yesterday morning, Monsieur de Fréjus disappeared. And where is he? God knows. And so the king, who had taken the loss of his marshal very well, was inconsolable at that of his bishop. And how do you know all that? Through the Duc de Richelieu, who went yesterday, about 2 o'clock, to Versailles, to pay his respects to the king, and who found His Majesty in despair in the midst of the china and ornaments which he had broken. Unfortunately, Richelieu, instead of encouraging the king's grief, made him laugh by telling him 100 stories, and almost consoled him by helping him to break the rest of the china and ornaments. At this moment, an individual clothed in a long advocate's robe and with a square cap passed near the group which was formed by Brigod, Harmental, and Valef, humming the burden of a song made on the marshal after the Battle of Ramillies. Brigod turned round, and, under disguise, thought he recognized Pompadour. On his part, the advocate stopped, and approached the group in question. The abbé had no longer any doubt. It was really the Marquis. "Well, Maître Clement," said he, "what news from the palace?" "Oh," answered Pompadour, "good news, particularly if it be true. They say that the Parliament refuses to come to the Tuileries." "Vive Dieu!" cried Valef. "That will reconcile me with the red robes. But they will not dare." "Why not?" "You know that Monsieur de Mesme is for us, and has been named president through the influence of Monsieur de Maine." "Yes, that is true, but that is long since," said Brigod. "And if you have nothing better to rely upon, Maître Clement, I should advise you not to count upon him." "Particularly," answered Valef, "as he has just obtained from a regent a payment of 500,000 francs of his salary." Oh, said Harmental. "See, it appears to me that something new is going on. Are they not coming out of the regent's council?" Indeed, a great movement was taking place in the court of the Tuileries, and the 2 carriages of the Duc de Maine and the Comte de Toulouse left their post and approached the clock pavilion. At the same instant they saw the 2 brothers appear. They exchanged few words. Each got into his own carriage, and the 2 vehicles departed at a rapid pace by the waterside wicket. For 10 minutes, Brigod, Harmental, Pompadour, and Valef were lost in conjectures regarding this event, which, having been remarked by others as well as by them, had made a sensation among the crowd, but without being able to assign it to its proper cause. Then they noticed Milesius, who appeared to be looking for them. They went to him, and by his discomposed face, they judged that the information which he had to bring was not comforting. "Well," asked Pompadour, "have you any idea of what has been going on?" "Alas!" answered Milesius, "I am afraid that all is lost." "You know that the Duc de Maine and the Comte de Toulouse have left the council?" asked Valef. "I was on the quay when he passed in his carriage, and he recognized me and stopped the carriage and sent me this little pencil note by his valet de chambre." "Let us see," said Brigod, and he read, "I do not know what is plotting against us, but the regent invited us, Toulouse and me, to leave the council. That invitation appeared to me in order, and, as all resistance would have been useless, seeing that we have in the council only 4 or 5 voices, upon which we cannot count, I was obliged to obey. Try and see the Duchesse, who must be at the Tuileries, and tell her that I am retiring to Rambouillet, where I shall wait for the turn of events. Your affectionate, Louis Auguste." "The coward," said Valef. "And these are the men for whom we risk our heads," murmured Pompadour. "You are mistaken, my dear Marquis," said Brigod. "We risk our heads on our own account, I hope, and not for others. Is not that true, Chevalier? Well, what the devil are you about now?" "Wait, Abbé," answered Harmental. "I seem to recognize, yes, by heaven, is he? You will not go away from this place, gentlemen." "No, I answer for myself at least," said Pompadour. "Nor I," said Valef. "Nor I," said Milesius. "Nor I," said the abbé. "Well, then, I will rejoin you in an instant." "Where are you going?" asked Brigod. "Do not look, abbé," said Harmental. It is on private business." Dropping Valef's arm, Darmental began to traverse the crowd in the direction of an individual whom he had been following with his eyes for some time, and who, thanks to his personal strength, had approached the gate. "Captain," said the Chevalier, tapping Roquefort on the shoulder, and hoping that, thanks to the movement occasioned by the approach of the Parliament, they should be able to talk without being observed, "can I say a few words to you in private?" "Yes, Chevalier, with the greatest pleasure." "What is it?" continued he, drawing back. "I have recognized you for the last 5 minutes, but it was not my business to speak first." "And I see with pleasure," said Darmental, "that Captain Roquefort is still prudent." "Prudentissimo, Chevalier. So if you have any new overture to make, out with it." "No, Captain, no, not at present, at least. Besides, the place is not suitable for a conference of that nature. Only I wish to know, in case of my having need of you, whether you still live in the same place." "Still, Chevalier, I am like a briar. I die where I grow. Only, instead of your finding me, as you did the first time, on the first or second floor, you'll have to look for me on the 5th or 6th, seeing that by a very natural seesaw movement, as my funds lower I go up." "How, Captain?" said Darmental, laughing, and put his hand in his pocket. "You are in want of money, and you do not address yourself to your friends?" "I borrow money," cried the captain, stopping Darmental's liberal intentions with a sign. "No. When I do you a service, you make me a present. Well and good. When I conclude a bargain, you execute the conditions. But I to ask without having a right to ask. It may do for a church rat, but not for a soldier. Although I am only a simple gentleman, I am as proud as a duke or a peer. But pardon me, if you want me, you know where to find me. Au revoir, Chevalier. Au revoir." And, without waiting for Darmental's answer, Roquefort left him, not thinking it safe that they should be seen talking together. As it was only 11 o'clock in the morning, however, and as in all probability the Parliament would not break up till 4 in the afternoon, and as no doubt there was nothing determined on yet, the Chevalier thought that, instead of remaining on the Place du Carrousel, he would do better to turn the 4 hours which he had before him to the profit of his love. Moreover, the nearer he approached the catastrophe, the more need he felt of seeing Bathilde. Bathilde had become one of the elements of his life, one of the organs necessary to his existence, and at the moment when he might perhaps be separated from her forever, he did not understand how he could live a single day away from her. Consequently, pressed by the eternal craving for the presence of the loved object, the Chevalier, instead of going to look for his companions, went toward the Rue du Temps Perdu. Darmental found the poor child very uneasy. Buvat had not come home since 9:30 the morning before. Nanette had been to inquire at the library, and to her great astonishment and the scandal of his fellow clerks, she had learned that he had not been there for 5 or 6 days. Such a derangement in Buvat's habits indicated serious events. On the other hand, the young girl had noticed in Raoul, the day before, a sort of nervous agitation, which, although kept down by determination, gave warning of an important crisis. Thus, joining her old fears to her new agonies, Bathilde felt instinctively that misfortune, invisible but inevitable, hung above her, and that at any moment it might fall on her devoted head. But when Bathilde saw Raoul, all fear, past or future, was lost in the happiness of the present. On his part, Raoul, whether it was self-command or a similar feeling to her own, thought of nothing but Bathilde. Nevertheless, this time the preoccupations on both sides were so powerful that Bathilde could not help expressing her uneasiness to Raoul. He made but little answer, for the absence of Buvat became connected in his mind with some suspicions which he had entertained for a minute and then cast from him. The time, nevertheless, flowed away with its accustomed rapidity, and 4 o'clock struck, when the lovers fancied that they had only been together a few minutes. It was the hour at which he generally took his leave. If Buvat returned, he would probably return at this time. After exchanging 100 vows, the two young people separated, agreeing that if anything new happened to either of them, whatever hour of the day or night it might be, they should let the other know directly. At the door of Madame Denis's house, Darmental met Brigod. The sitting was over and nothing positive was yet known, but vague rumors were afloat that terrible measures had been taken. The information must soon arrive, and Brigard had fixed a rendezvous with Pompadour and Milesius at Darmental's lodgings, which, as they were the least known, must be the least watched. In about an hour, the Marquis de Pompadour arrived. The Parliament had at first wished to make opposition, but everything had given way before the will of the regent. The King of Spain's letters had been read and condemned. It had been decided that the dukes and peers should rank immediately after the princes of the blood. The honors of the legitimated princes were restricted to the simple rank of their peerages. Finally, the Duc de Maine lost the superintendence of the king's education, which was given to the Duc de Bourbon. The Comte de Toulouse alone was maintained, during his lifetime, in his privileges and prerogatives. Milesius arrived in his turn. He had recently left the Duchess. They had just given her notice to quit her apartments in the Tuileries, which belonged henceforward to Monsieur le Duc. Such an affront had, as may easily be understood, exasperated the granddaughter of the great Condé. She had flown into a violent passion, broken all the looking-glasses with her own hands, and had all the furniture thrown out of the window. Then, this performance finished, she had got into her carriage, sending Laval to Rambouillet, in order to urge Monsieur de Maine to some vigorous action, and charging Milesius to assemble all her friends that evening at the Arsenal. Pompadour and Brigard cried out against the imprudence of such a meeting. Madame de Maine was evidently watched. To go to the Arsenal the day, when they must know that she was the most irritated, would be to compromise themselves openly. Pompadour and Brigard were therefore in favor of going, and begging Her Highness to appoint some other time or place for the rendezvous. Milesius and Darmental were the same opinion regarding the dangerous step, but they both declared, the first from devotion, the second from a sense of duty, that the more perilous the order was, the more honorable it would be to obey it. The discussion, as always happens in similar circumstances, began to degenerate into a pretty sharp altercation, when they heard the steps of two persons mounting the stairs. As the three individuals who had appointed a meeting at Darmental's were all assembled, Brigard, who, with his ear always on qui-vive, had heard the sound first, put his finger to his mouth to impose silence on the disputants. They could plainly hear the steps approaching, then a low whispering as of two people questioning. Finally, the door opened and gave entrance to a soldier of the French Guard and a little grisette. The guardsman was the Baron de Valef. As to the grisette, she threw off the little black veil which hid her face, and they recognized Madame de Maine. Chapter 35. Man proposes. Your Highness at my lodging, cried Darmental. What have I done to merit such an honor? The hour is come, Chevalier, said the Duchess, when it is right that we should show people the opinion we hold of their merits. It shall never be said that the friends of Madame de Maine expose themselves for her, and that she does not expose herself with them. Thank God, I am the granddaughter of the great Condé, and I feel that I am worthy of my ancestor. Your Highness is most welcome, said Pompadour, for your arrival will get us out of a difficulty. Decided, as we were, to obey your orders, we nevertheless hesitated at the idea of the danger incurred by an assembly at the Arsenal at such a moment as the present, when the police have their eyes upon it. And I thought with you, Marquis. So, instead of waiting for you, I resolved to come and seek you. The Baron accompanied me. I went to the house of the Comtesse de Chevigny, a friend of Delaunay's, who lives in the Rue du Mail. We had clothes brought there, and as we were only a few steps off, we came here on foot, and here we are. On my honor, Messire Voyer d'Argenson would be clever, indeed, if he recognized us in this disguise. I see with pleasure, said Milesius, that your Highness is not cast down by the events of this horrible day. Cast down? I? Milesius, I hope you know me too well to have feared it for a single instant. Cast down? On the contrary, I never felt more vigor or more determination. Oh, if I only were a man! Let your Highness command, said Darmental, and everything that you would do if you could act yourself, we will do, we who stand in your stead. No, no, it is impossible that any other should do that which I should have done. Nothing is impossible, madam, to 5 men as devoted as we are. Moreover, our interests demand a prompt and energetic course of action. It is not reasonable to believe that the regent will stop there. The day after tomorrow evening, perhaps, we shall all be arrested. Du Bois gives out that the paper which he saved from the flames of the Prince of Celomers is nothing less than the list of the conspirators. In that case, he knows all our names. We have, then, at this very moment, a sword hanging over each of our heads. Do not let us wait tamely till the thread which suspends it snaps. Let us seize it and strike. Strike? What, where, and how? Asked Brigod. That abominable Parliament has destroyed all our schemes. Have we measures taken, or a plot made out? The best plan which has been conceived, said Pompadour, and the one which offered the greatest chance of success, was the first. And the proof is that it was only overthrown by an unheard of circumstance. Well, if the plan was good, then it is so still, said Valef. Let us return to it. Yes, but in failing, said Milesius, this plan put the regent on his guard. On the contrary, said Pompadour, in consequence of that very failure, it will be supposed that we have abandoned it. And the proof is, said Valef, that the regent on this head takes fewer precautions than ever. For example, since his daughter, Mademoiselle de Chartres, has become abbess of Chelles, he goes to see her every week, and he goes through the wood of Vincennes without guards, and with only a coachman and 2 lackeys, and that at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And what day does he pay this visit? Asked Brigod. Wednesday. That is tomorrow, said the Duchess. Brigod, said Valef, have you still the passport for Spain? Yes. And the same facilities for the route? The same. The postmaster is with us, and we shall have only to explain to him. Well, said Valef, if Her Royal Highness will allow me, I will tomorrow call together 7 or 8 friends, wait for the regent in the Bois de Vincennes, carry him off, and in 3 days I am at Pampeluna. An instant, my dear Baron, said Harmental. I would observe to you that you are stepping into my shoes, and that this undertaking belongs to me of right. You, my dear Chevalier, you have already done what you had to do. Now it is our turn. Not at all, if you please, Valef. My honor is concerned in it, for I have revenge to take. You would annoy me infinitely by insisting on this subject. All that I can do for you, my dear Harmental, said Valef, is to leave it to Her Highness's choice. She knows that we are equally devoted to her. Let her decide. Will you accept my arbitration, Chevalier? Said the Duchess. Yes, for I trust to your justice, madam, said Harmental. And you are right. Yes, the honor of the undertaking belongs to you. I place in your hands the fate of the son of Louis XIV and the granddaughter of the great Condé. I trust entirely to your devotion and courage, and I have the greater hope of your success. That fortune owes you a compensation. To you, my dear Harmental, all the honor and all the peril. I accept both with gratitude, said Harmental, kissing the Duchess's hand, and tomorrow at this hour I shall be dead, or the regent will be on the way to Spain. Very good, said Pompadour. That is what I call speaking. And if you want anyone to give you a helping hand, my dear Chevalier, count on me. And on me, said Valef. And are we good for nothing? Said Milesius. My dear Chancellor, said the Duchess, to each one his share. To poets, churchmen, and magistrates, advice. To soldiers, execution. Chevalier, are you sure of finding the men who assisted you before? I am sure of their chief, at least. When shall you see him? This evening. At what time? Directly, if your Highness wishes it. The sooner the better. In a quarter of an hour I will be ready. Where can we learn the result of the interview? I will come to your Highness, wheresoever you may be. Not at the arsenal, said Brigod. It is too dangerous. Can we not wait here? Asked the Duchess. Remember, said Brigod, that my pupil is a steady fellow, receiving scarcely anyone, and that a long visit might arouse suspicion. Can we not fix a rendezvous where there will be no such fear? Asked Pompadour. Certainly, said the Duchess, at the Stone in the Champs-Élysées, for instance. Milesius and I will come there in a carriage without livery and without arms. Pompadour, Valef, and Brigod will meet us there, each one separately. There we will wait for Harmental and settle the last measure. That will suit well, said Harmental, for my man lives in the Rue Saint-Honoré. You know, Chevalier, replied the Duchess, that you may promise as much money as you like. I undertake to fill the purse, said Brigod. That is well, Abbé, for I know who will undertake to empty it, said Harmental. Then all is agreed, said the Duchess. In an hour in the Champs-Élysées. Then the Duchess, having readjusted her mantle so as to hide her face, took Voleff's arm and went out. Milesius followed at a little distance. Taking care not to lose sight of her, Brigod and Pompadour went out together, and Harmental went directly to the Rue Saint-Honoré. Whether it were chance or calculation on the part of the Duchess, who appreciated Harmental and understood how fully she might rely upon him, the Chevalier found himself more than ever put forward in the conspiracy. But his honor was engaged, and although he foresaw the terrible consequences of the step which he was about to take, he went boldly forward, resolved to sacrifice everything, even his life and his love, to the fulfillment of his promise. He presented himself at La Filon's with the same tranquility as before, although many things were altered in his life since then, and having been, as before, received by the mistress of the house in person, he inquired if Captain Roquefort were visible. Without doubt La Filon had expected a much less moral demand, for on recognizing Harmental, she could not repress a movement of surprise. However, she asked if he were not the same person who, 2 months before, had come there to inquire for the captain. Harmental replied in the affirmative. As soon as she was informed on this point, she called a servant and ordered her to conduct the Chevalier to number 72. The girl obeyed, taking a candle, and going before Harmental, who followed her. This time, no songs guided him in his ascent. All was silent in the house, and as the Chevalier himself was occupied with grave thoughts, he mounted the 6 flights and knocked at once at the door. "Enter," said Roquefort. The Chevalier slipped a Louis into the servant's hand, opened the door, and went in. The same change was observable in the interior as in the exterior. Roquefort was no longer, as on the first occasion, sitting among the debris of a feast, surrounded by slaves, smoking his long pipe. He was alone in a little dark attic, lighted by a single candle, which, nearly burned out, gave more smoke than flame, and whose flickering light gave a strange expression to the harsh face of the brave captain, who was standing leaning against the chimney-piece. "Ah!" said Roquefort in a slightly ironical tone. "It is you, Chevalier! I expected you. You expected me, Captain. And what induced you to do so?" "Events, Chevalier, events." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you thought you could make open war, and consequently put poor Captain Roquefort aside, as a bandit, who is good for nothing but a nocturnal blow at a street corner or in a wood, and now du Bois knows all. The Parliament, on whom we thought we might count, have failed us, and have said yes instead of no. Now we come back to the captain. My dear captain here, my good captain there, is not this exactly as it has happened, Chevalier? Well, here's the captain. What do you want of him? Speak." "Really, my dear captain," said Harmental, not knowing exactly how to take this speech, "there is some truth in what you say. Only you are mistaken if you think we had forgotten you. If our plan had succeeded, you would have had proof that my memory was better, and I should have come to offer you my credit, as I now come to ask your assistance." "Hum," said the captain. "For the last 3 days, since I have inhabited this new apartment, I have made many reflections on the vanity of human things, and have more than once felt inclined to retire altogether from these affairs. Or, if I did undertake one, to take care that it should be sufficiently brilliant to ensure my future. What I come to propose to you is just the thing. Without preamble, it is—" "What?" asked the captain, after waiting 2 or 3 minutes in vain for the end of the speech. "Oh, captain, I thought—" "What did you think, Chevalier?" "I thought I heard steps, a sort of creaking in the wall." "Ah!" said the captain. "There are not a few rats in this establishment, I can tell you." "Oh, that must be it," said Harmental. "Well, my dear Roquefort, we wish to profit by the Regent's returning unguarded from shells to carry him off and take him to Spain." "Before going any further," said Roquefort, "I must warn you that this is a new treaty, and that every new treaty implies new conditions. No need of discussions on that point. You shall fix them yourself. But can you still dispose of your men?" "I can." "Will they be ready at 2 o'clock tomorrow?" "They will." That is all that is necessary. Something else is necessary: money to buy a horse and arms. There are 100 louis in that purse. Take it. It is well. You shall have an account of it. Then tomorrow at my house at 2 o'clock. It is agreed. Chevalier, you are not to be astonished if I am a little exacting. You know that last time I only complained of your being too modest. Very well, that will do, said the captain. You are easily satisfied. Let me light you. It would be a pity that a brave fellow like you should break his neck. And the captain took the candle, which now burned down to the paper, threw a splendid light over the staircase. Harmental had not forgotten that Madame de Maine waited with anxiety for the result of the interview. He did not trouble himself, therefore, about what had become of La Filin, whom he did not see on leaving, and having gone down the Rue de Feuillants, he passed along the Champs-Élysées, which, without being altogether deserted, was nevertheless almost solitary. Having arrived at the stone, he noticed a carriage standing on the opposite side of the road, while two men were walking at a little distance off in the crossroad. He approached the carriage. A woman, seeing him, put her head impatiently out of the window. The Chevalier recognized Madame de Maine. Malezieux and Valif were with her. As to the walkers, who, seeing Harmental, approached the vehicle, it is needless to say that they were Brigaud and Pompadour. The Chevalier, without naming Roquevanet or enlarging on the character of the illustrious captain, told them in a few words what had passed. This recital was welcomed by a general exclamation of joy. The Duchess gave Harmental her hand to kiss. The men pressed his. It was agreed that the next day at 2 o'clock the Duchess, Pompadour, Laval, Valif, Malezieux, and Brigaud should meet at number 15, Faubourg Saint-Antoine, a house occupied by Davranches' mother, and that they should there await the event. The result was to be announced to them by Davranches himself, who, at 3 o'clock, should be at the Barrière du Trône with 2 horses, one for himself, the other for the Chevalier. He was to follow Harmental at a distance, and return to announce what had passed. 5 other horses, saddled and bridled, were to be ready in the stables of the house in the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, so that the conspirators might fly at once in case of the Chevalier's failure. These plans settled, the Duchess forced the Chevalier to seat himself beside her. The Duchess wished to drive him home, but he told her that the appearance of a carriage at Madame Denis's door would produce too much sensation, and that, flattering as it would be to him, it would be too dangerous for all. In consequence, the Duchess set Harmental down in the Place de Victoires, after repeatedly expressing her gratitude for his devotion. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. Harmental had scarcely seen Bathilde during the day. He wished to see her again. He was sure to find her at her window, but that was not sufficient, for what he had to say was too serious to be thus spoken from one side to the other of the street. He was thinking under what pretext he could present himself at such a late hour, when he thought he saw a woman at the door of her house. He advanced and recognized Annette, who was there by Bathilde's order. The poor girl was dreadfully uneasy, Beauvat not having returned. All the evening she had remained at the window to watch for Harmental, but had not seen him. It seemed to Bathilde that there must be some connection between Beauvat's strange disappearance and the melancholy which he had remarked the day before in Harmental's face. Nanette was waiting at the door for Beauvat and Harmental. She now waited for Beauvat, and Harmental went up to Bathilde. Bathilde had heard and recognized the step, and ran to open the door. At the first glance, she noticed the pensive expression of his face. "Oh, mon Dieu, Raoul," she exclaimed. "Has anything happened to you?" "Bathilde," said Harmental with a melancholy smile, "you have often told me that there is in me something mysterious which frightens you." "Yes," cried Bathilde. "It is the only torment of my life, my only fear for the future." "And you are right. For before I knew you, Bathilde, I had abandoned a part of my free will. This portion of myself no longer belongs to me, but submits to supreme law and unforeseen events. It is a black point in a clear sky. According to the way the wind blows, it may disappear as a vapor or increase into a storm. The hand which holds and guides mine may lead me to the highest favor or to the most complete disgrace. Tell me, Bathilde, are you disposed to share my good and evil fortune, the calm and the tempest?" "Everything with you, Raoul. Think of what you are undertaking, Bathilde." It may be a happy and a brilliant life which is reserved for you. It may be exile. It may be captivity. It may be that you'll be a widow before you are a wife." Bathilde turned so pale that Raoul thought she would fall, but she quickly regained her self-command, and, holding out her hand to Darmental, "Raoul," said she, "have I not already told you that I love you, that I never have and never can love any other? It seems to me that all these promises you ask are included in those words, but since you wish them renewed, I do so. Your life shall be my life, and your death my death. Both are in the hands of God. And I, Bathilde," said Darmental, leading her before the crucifix, "I swear that from this moment you are my wife before God and before men. And since the events which may dispose of my life leave me nothing but my love to offer to you, that love is yours, profound, unalterable, eternal." And the young people exchanged their first kiss with a renewal of their vows. When Darmental left Bathilde, Buvat had not returned. Chapter 36. David and Goliath. Toward 10 o'clock in the morning, the Abbé Brigaud entered Darmental's room. He brought him 20,000 francs, partly in gold, partly in Spanish paper. The Duchess had passed the night at the Comtesse de Chevigny's, in the Rue du Mail. The plans of preceding day were in no degree changed, and they had ascertained that the Regent would pay his accustomed visit to Chelles. At 10 o'clock, Brigaud and Darmental went down, Brigaud to join Pompadour and Valif on the Boulevard du Temple, and Darmental to visit Bathilde. Uneasiness was at its height in the little household. Buvat was still absent, and it was easy to see by Bathilde's eyes that she had had but little sleep. As soon as she saw Darmental, she understood that some expedition was preparing. Darmental again wore that dark costume in which she had never seen him but on that evening when, on returning, he had thrown his mantle on a chair and displayed to her sight the pistols in his belt. Moreover, she saw by his spurs that he expected a ride during the day. All these things would have appeared insignificant at any other time, but after the nocturnal betrothal we have described, they took a new and grave importance. Bathilde tried at first to make the Chevalier speak, but he told her that the secret she asked did not belong to himself, and she desisted. An hour after, Nanette appeared with distressed face. She came from the library. Buvat had not been there, and no one had heard anything of him. Bathilde could contain herself no longer. She fell into Raoul's arms and burst into tears. Then Raoul confessed to her his fears, and that the papers which the pretended Prince de Lisney had given Buvat to copy were politically important, by which he might have been compromised and arrested, but had nothing to fear, and that the passive part which he had played in this affair did not endanger him in the least. Bathilde, having feared so much greater misfortune, eagerly seized on this idea. She did not confess to herself that the greater part of her uneasiness was not for Buvat, and that all the tears she shed were not for the absent. When Darmental was near Bathilde, time appeared to fly. He was astonished when he found that he had been with her an hour and a half, and remembering that at 2 o'clock he had to arrange his new treaty with Roquefort, he rose to go. Bathilde turned pale. Darmental, to reassure her, promised to come to her again after the departure of the person he expected. The Chevalier had only been a few minutes at his window when he saw Roquefort appear at the corner of the Rue Montmartre. He was mounted on a dapple-gray horse, both swift and strong, and evidently chosen by a connoisseur. He came along leisurely, like a man to whom it is equally indifferent whether he is seen or not. On arriving at the door, he dismounted, fastened up his horse, and ascended the stairs. As on the day before, his face was grave and pensive. His compressed lips indicated some fixed determination, and Darmental received him with a smile which met with no answer on the captain's face. Darmental at a glance took in all these different signs. "Well, Captain," said he, "I see that you are still punctuality itself. It is a military habit, Chevalier, and is not astonishing in an old soldier. I did not doubt you, but you might not have been able to meet your men. I told you I knew where to find them. And where are they?" "In the horse market at the Porte Saint-Martin. Are you not afraid they will be noticed? How should 12 or 15 men dressed as peasants be noticed among 300 other peasants, buying and selling horses? It is like a needle in a bottle of hay, which none but myself can find. But how can these men accompany you, Captain? The simplest thing in the world. Each one has bargained for the horse which suits him. Each one has offered price, to which the vendor replies by another, I arrive, give to each 25 or 30 louis. Every one pays for his horse, has it saddled, mounts, slips into the holsters of pistols which he has in his belt, and, by a different route, arrives at a given place in the Bois de Vincennes at 4 o'clock. Then only I explain to them for what they are wanted. I again distribute money, put myself at the head of my squadron, and go to the work, supposing that you and I agree on conditions. Well, these conditions, Captain, said Harmental, let us discuss them, and I think I have arranged so that you will be satisfied with what I have to offer you. Let us hear them, said Roquefort, sitting down by the table. First, double the sum you received last time, said the Chevalier. Ah, said Roquefort, I do not care for money. What? You do not care for money, Captain? Not the least in the world. What do you care for, then? A position. What do you mean? I mean, Chevalier, that every day I am 24 hours older, and that with age comes philosophy. Well, Captain, said Harmental, beginning to be seriously uneasy, what is the ambition of your philosophy? I have told you, Chevalier, a position suitable to my long services. Not in France, you understand. In France I have too many enemies, beginning with the lieutenant police. But in Spain, for instance, that would suit me well. A fine country, beautiful women, plenty of doubloons. Decidedly, I should like a rank in Spain. The thing is possible. It depends on the rank you desire. Well, you know, Chevalier, when one is wishing, it is as well to wish for something worth the trouble. You make me uneasy, monsieur, said Harmental, for I have not the seals of King Philip to sign brevets in his name. But never mind, speak. Well, said Roquefort, I see so many greenhorns at the heads of regiments that I also have thought of being a colonel. Colonel? Impossible. Why so? Because if they make you a colonel, you only hold a secondary position in the affair. What am I to ask, I, who am at the head? That is the very thing. I wish to change position for the moment. You remember what I said to you on a certain evening in the Rue du Valois. Aid my memory, Captain. I have unfortunately forgotten. I told you that if I had an affair like this to manage, things would go better. I added that I would speak to you of it again. I do so now. What the devil are you talking about, Captain? A simple matter, Chevalier. We made a first attempt together, which failed. Then you changed batteries. You thought you could do without me, and you failed again. The first time you failed at night, and without noise. We each went our own way, and there was nothing known about it. The second time, on the contrary, you failed in broad daylight, and with a claw which has compromised all. So that if you do not save yourselves by a bold stroke, you are all lost, as Dubois has your names, and tomorrow, tonight perhaps, you may be all arrested knights, barons, dukes, and princes. Now, there is in the world one man, and one only, who can free you from your troubles. That man is Captain Roquefort, and you offer him the same place he held before. Fie, Chevalier, you wish to bargain with him. Remember, pretensions increase with the services to be rendered. I am now an important personage. Treat me as such, or I put my hand in my pockets, and leave Dubois to do as he likes. Harmental bit his lips, but he understood that he had to treat with a man who was accustomed to sell his services as dear as possible. And as what the captain said of the necessity was literally true, he restrained his impatience and his pride. Then you wish to be a colonel? That is my idea. But suppose I make you this promise, who can answer that I have influence enough to ratify it? Oh, Chevalier, I reckon on managing my little affairs myself. Where? At Madrid. Who told you that I shall take you there? I do not know if you will take me there, but I know that I shall go there. You to Madrid? What for? To take the regent. You are mad. Come, Chevalier, no big words. You ask my conditions. I tell them you. They do not suit you. Good evening. We are not the worst friends for that. And Roquefort rose, took his hat, and was going toward the door. What, are you going? Certainly. But you forget, Captain. It is true, said Roquefort, intentionally mistaking Darnley less meaning. You gave me 100 louis. I must give you an account of them. He took his purse from his pocket. A horse, 30 louis. A pair of double-barreled pistols, 10 louis. A saddle, bridle, etc., 2 louis. Total, 42 louis. There are 58 louis in this purse. The horse, pistols, saddle, and bridle are yours. Count, we are quits. And he threw the purse on the table. But that is not what I have to say to you, Captain. What is it, then? That it is impossible to confide to you a mission of such importance. It must be so, nevertheless, or not at all. I must take the Regent to Madrid, and I alone, or he remains at the Palais Royal. And you think yourself worthy to take from the hands of Philippe d'Orleans the sword which conquered at Lerida la Pucelle, and which rested by the scepter of Louis XIV, on the velvet cushion with the golden tassels? I heard in Italy that Francis I, at the Battle of Pavia, gave up as to a butcher. And the captain pressed his hat on his head, and once more approached the door. Listen, Captain, said Harmental, in his most conciliating tone. A truce to arguments and quotations. Let us split the difference. I will conduct the Regent to Spain, and you shall accompany me. Yes, so that the poor captain may be lost in the dust which the dashing Chevalier excites, and that the brilliant colonel may throw the old bandit into the shade. Impossible, Chevalier, impossible. I will have the management of the affair, or I will have nothing to do with it. But this is treason, cried Harmental. Treason, Chevalier. And where have you seen, if you please, that Captain Roquefinet was a traitor? Where are the agreements which I have made and not kept? Where are the secrets which I have divulged? I, a traitor? Good heavens, Chevalier, it was only the day before yesterday that I was offered gold to betray you, and I refused. No. Yesterday you came and asked me to aid you a second time. I told you that I was ready, but on new conditions. Well, I have just told you those conditions. Accept them or refuse them. Where do you see treason in all this? And if I was weak enough to accept these conditions, monsieur, do you imagine that the confidence which Her Royal Highness the Duchesse de Maine reposes in the Chevalier de Harmental can be transferred to Captain Roquefinet? And what has the Duchesse de Maine to remark upon in this? You undertake a piece of business. There are material hindrances in the way of your executing it yourself. You hand it over to me. That is all. That is to say, answered Harmental, shaking his head, that you wish to be free to loose the Regent. If the Regent offers you, for leaving him in France, twice as much as I offer you for taking him to Spain. Perhaps, replied Roquefinet. Hearken, Captain, said Harmental, making a new effort to retain his sang-froid and endeavoring to renew the negotiations. I will give you 20,000 francs down. Trash, answered the captain. I will take you with me to Spain. Fiddlesticks. And I engage on my honor to obtain you a regiment. Roquefinet began to hum a tune. Take care, said Harmental. It is more dangerous for you now, at the point at which we have arrived, and with the terrible secrets which you know, to refuse than to accept. And what will happen then if I refuse? Asked Roquefinet. It will happen, Captain, that you will not leave this room. And who will prevent me? I, cried Harmental, bounding before the door, a pistol in each hand. You, said Roquefinet, making a step toward the Chevalier, and then crossing his arms and regarding him fixedly. One step more, Captain, said the Chevalier, and I give you my word I will blow your brains out. You blow my brains out. You, in the first place, it is necessary for that you should not tremble like an old woman. Do you know what you will do? You will miss me. The noise will alarm the neighbors, who will call the guard, and they will question me as to the reasons of your shooting at me, and I shall be obliged to tell them. Yes, you are right, Captain, cried the Chevalier, uncocking his pistols and replacing them in his belt, and I shall be obliged to kill you more honorably than you deserve. Draw, monsieur, draw. And Harmental, leaning his left foot against the door, drew his sword, and placed himself on guard. It was a court sword, a thin ribbon of steel, set in a gold handle. Roquefinet began to laugh. With what shall I defend myself, Chevalier? Do you happen to have one of your mistress's knitting needles here? Defend yourself with your own sword, monsieur. Long as it is, you see that I am placed so that I cannot make a step to avoid it. What do you think of that, my dear? Said the captain, addressing his blade. "It thinks that you are a coward, Captain," cried Harmental, "since it is necessary to strike you in the face to make you fight." And with a movement as quick as lightning, Harmental cut the captain across the face with his rapier, leaving on the cheek a long blue mark like the mark of a whip. Roquefort gave a cry which might have been taken for the roaring of a lion, and bounding back a step, threw himself on guard, his sword in his hand. Then began between these two men a duel, terrible, hidden, silent, for both were intent on their work, and each understood what sort of an adversary he had to contend with. By a reaction, very easy to be understood, it was now Harmental who was calm, and Roquefort who was excited. Every instant he menaced Harmental with his long sword, but the frail rapier followed as iron follows a lodestone, twisting and spinning round it like a viper. At the end of about 5 minutes, the Chevalier had not made a single lunge, but he had parried all those of his adversary. At last, on a more rapid thrust than the others, he came too late to the parry, and felt the point of his adversary's sword at his breast. At the same time, a red spot spread from his shirt to his lace frill. Harmental saw it, and with a spring engaged so near to Roquefort that the hilts almost touched, the captain instantly saw the disadvantage of his long sword in such a position. A thrust, Sir less arms, and he was lost. He made a spring backward, his foot slipped on the newly waxed floor, and his sword hand rose in spite of himself. Almost by instinct, Harmental profited by it, lunged within, and pierced the captain's chest, where the blade disappeared to the hilt. Harmental recovered a parry in return, but the precaution was needless. The captain stood still an instant, opened his eyes wildly. The sword dropped from his grasp, and pressing his two hands to the wound, he fell at full length on the floor. "Curse the rapier," murmured he, and expired. The strip of steel had pierced his heart. Still Harmental remained on guard, with his eyes fixed on the captain, only lowering his sword as the dead man let it slip. Finally, he found himself face to face with a corpse, but this corpse had its eyes open and continued to look at him. Leaning against the door, the Chevalier remained an instant thunderstruck. His hair bristled. His forehead became covered with perspiration. He did not dare to move. He did not dare to speak. His victory seemed to him a dream. Suddenly the mouth of the dying man set in a last convulsion. The partisan was dead, and his secret had died with him. How to recognize? In the midst of 300 peasants, buying and selling horses, the 12 or 15 pretended ones who were to carry off the regent. Harmental gave a low cry. He would have given 10 years of his own life to add 10 minutes to that of captain. He took the body in his arms, raised it, called it, and, seeing his reddened hands, let it fall into a sea of blood, which, following the inclination of the boards down a channel in the floor, reached the door and began to spread over the threshold. At that moment, the horse, which was tied to the shutter, neighed violently. Harmental made 3 steps toward the door. Then he remembered that Roquefort might have some memorandum about him which might serve as a guide. In spite of his repugnance, he searched the pockets of the corpse, one after another, but the only papers he found were 2 or 3 old bills of restaurateurs, and a love letter from La Normande. Then, as he had nothing more to do in that room, he filled his pockets with golden notes, closed the door after him, descended the stairs rapidly, left at a gallop toward the Rue Gros Chenet, and disappeared round the angle nearest to the boulevard. Chapter 37. The Savior of France. While these terrible events were going forward in the attic of Madame Denis's house, Bathilde, uneasy at seeing her neighbor's window so long shut, had opened hers, and the first thing she saw was a dappled gray horse attached to the shutter. But as she had not seen the captain go in, she thought that the steed was for Raoul, and that reflection immediately recalled both her former and present fears. Bathilde consequently remained at the window, looking on all sides, and tried to read in the physiognomy of every passerby whether that individual was an actor in the mysterious drama which was preparing, and in which she instinctively understood that Raoul was to play the chief part. She remained, then, with a beating heart, her neck stretched out, and her eyes wandering hither and thither, when all at once her unquiet glances concentrated on a point. The young girl gave a cry of joy, for she saw a buvette coming round the corner from the Rue Montmartre. Indeed, it was the worthy calligraphist in person, who, looking behind him from time to time, as if he feared pursuit, advanced with his cane horizontal, and at as swift a run as his little legs permitted, while he enters and embraces his ward. Let us look back and relate the causes of that absence, which doubtless caused as much uneasiness to our readers as to Nanette and Bathilde. It will be remembered how Buvat, driven by fear torture to the revelation of conspiracy, had been forced by Du Bois to make every day at his house a copy of the documents which the pretended Prince de Lisney had given him. It was thus that the minister of the Regent had successively learned all the projects of conspirators, which he had defeated by the arrest of Marshal Villeroy and by the convocation of Parliament. Buvat had been at work as usual, but about 4 o'clock as he rose and took his hat in one hand and his cane in the other, Du Bois came in and took him into a little room above that where he had been working, and, having arrived there, asked him what he thought of the apartment. Flattered by this deference of the Prime Minister's to his judgment, Buvat hastened to reply that he thought it very agreeable. "So much the better," answered Du Bois, "and I am very glad that it is to your taste, for it is yours." "Mine!" cried Buvat, astonished. "Certainly. Is it astonishing that I should wish to have under my hand, or rather under my eyes, a personage as important as yourself? But," asked Buvat, "am I then going to live in the Palais Royal?" "For some days, at least," answered Du Bois. "Monseigneur, let me at all events inform Bathilde." "That is just the thing. Bathilde must not be informed." The body of the captain lay stretched on the floor, swimming in a sea of blood. Page 408, linked to larger image. "But you will permit that the first time I go out." "As long as you remain here, you will not go out." "But," cried Buvat with terror, "but I am then a prisoner?" "A state prisoner, as you have said, my dear Buvat. But calm yourself. Your captivity will not be long, and while it lasts we will take of you all the care which is due of the Savior of France, for you have saved France, Monsieur Buvat." "I have saved France, and here I am a prisoner under bolts and bars." "And where on earth do you see bolts and bars, my dear Buvat?" said Du Bois, laughing. "The door shuts with a latch, and has not even a lock. As to the window, yours looks on the gardens of the Palais Royal, and has not even a lattice to intercept the view, a superb view. You are lodged here like the Regent himself." "Oh, my little room! Oh, my terrace!" cried Buvat, letting himself sink exhausted on a seat. Du Bois, who had no other consolation to bestow upon Buvat, went out and placed a sentinel at the door. The explanation of this step is easy. Du Bois feared that, seeing the arrest of Villeroy, they would suspect from whence the information came and would question Buvat, and that he would confess all. This confession would, doubtless, have arrested the conspirators in the midst of their schemes, which, on the contrary, Du Bois, informed beforehand of all their plans, wished to see carried to a point, so that in crushing one monster rebellion, he might put an end to all lesser ones. Toward 8 o'clock, as daylight began to fade, Buvat heard a great noise at his door and a sort of metallic clashing, which did not tend to reassure him. He had heard plenty of lamentable stories of state prisoners who had been assassinated in their prisons, and he rose trembling and ran to the window. The court and gardens of the Palais Royal were full of people. The galleries began to be lighted up. The whole scene was full of gaiety and light. He heaved a profound sigh, thinking perhaps that he might be bidding a last adieu to that life and animation. At that instant the door was opened. Buvat turned round shuddering, and saw 2 tall footmen in red livery bringing in a well-supplied table. The metallic noise which had so much disturbed him had been the clattering of the silver plates and dishes. Buvat's first impression was one of thankfulness to heaven, that so imminent a danger as that which he had feared had changed into such a satisfactory event. But immediately the idea struck him that the deadly intentions held toward him were still the same, and that only the mode of their execution were changed. Instead of being assassinated like Jeanson's pair or the Duc de Guise, he was going to be poisoned like the Dauphin or the Duc de Burgundy. He threw a rapid glance on the 2 footmen, and thought he remarked something somber which denoted the agents of a secret vengeance. From this instant his determination was taken, and in spite of the scent of the dishes, which appeared to him an additional proof, he refused all sustenance, saying majestically that he was neither hungry nor thirsty. The footmen looked at each other knowingly. They were 2 sharp fellows, and had understood Buvat's character at a glance, and now understanding a man not being hungry when before a pheasant stuffed with truffles, or not thirsty before a bottle of Chamberlain, had penetrated the prisoner's fears pretty quickly. They exchanged a few words in a low tone, and the boldest of the 2, seeing that there was a means of drawing some profit from the circumstances, advanced toward Buvat, who recoiled before him as far as the room would allow. "Monsieur," said he, in a reassuring tone, "we understand your fears, and, as we are honest servants, we will show you that we are incapable of lending ourselves to the dealings which you suspect. Consequently, during the whole time that you remain here, my comrade and I, each in our turn, will taste all the dishes which are brought you and all the wines which are sent in, happy if by our devotion we can restore your tranquility." "Monsieur," answered Buvat, ashamed that his secret sentiments had been discovered thus, "Monsieur, you are very polite, but in truth I am neither hungry nor thirsty." "Never mind, monsieur," said the man. "As my comrade and myself desire not to leave the smallest doubt on your mind, we will execute what we have offered. Comme toi, my friend," continued the fellow, sitting down in the place which had been intended for Buvat. "Do me the favor to help me to a little of that soup, a wing of that pullet and rice, a glass of that chamberlain there. To your health, monsieur." "Monsieur," said Buvat, opening his eyes and looking at the footman who was dining so impudently in his stead. "Monsieur, it is I who am your servant, and I should wish to know your name, in order to preserve in my memory by the side of that of the good jailer, who gave to Comte Alencien a similar proof of devotion to that which you give me." "Monsieur," answered the footman modestly, "I am called Bourguignon, and here is my comrade Comtois, whose turn for devotion will come tomorrow, and who, when the moment shall have arrived, will not be behindhand. Comtois, my friend, a slice of that pheasant, and a glass of champagne. Do you not see that, in order to reassure monsieur completely, I must taste everything? It is a severe test, I know, but where would be the merit of being an honest man, if it did not sometimes bring trials like the present? To your health, Monsieur Buvat. Heaven preserve yours, Monsieur Bourguignon. Now, Comtois, hand me the dessert, so that I may leave no doubt on Monsieur Buvat's mind. Monsieur Bourguignon, I beg you to believe that, if I had any, they are completely dissipated." "No, monsieur, no. I beg your pardon, you still have some. Comtois, my friend, now the hot coffee, very hot. I wish to drink it exactly as monsieur would have done, and I presume it is thus that monsieur likes it." "Boiling, monsieur, boiling," answered Buvat, bowing. "Oh," said Bourguignon, sipping his coffee, and raised his eyes blissfully to the ceiling. "You are right, monsieur. It is only so that coffee is good. Half cold it is a very second-rate beverage. This, I may say, is excellent. Comtois, my friend, receive my compliments. You wait admirably. Now help me take away the table. You ought to know that there is nothing more unpleasant than the smell of wines and viands to those who are not hungry nor thirsty. Monsieur," continued Bourguignon, stepping toward the door, which he had carefully shut during the repast, and which he opened while a companion pushed the table before him, "Monsieur, if you have need of anything, you have 3 bells, 1 at the head of your bed and 2 at the mantelpiece. Those at the fireplace are for us, that at the bed for your valet de chambre." "Thank you, monsieur," said Buvat. "You are too good. I do not wish to disturb anyone." "Do not trouble yourself about that, monsieur. Monseigneur desires that you should make yourself a home." "Monseigneur is very polite. Does monsieur require anything else?" "Nothing more, my friend, nothing more," said Buvat, touched by so much devotion. "Nothing, except to express my gratitude." "I have only done my duty, monsieur," answered Bourguignon, modestly, bowing for the last time and shutting the door. "Ma foi," said Buvat, following Bourguignon with his eyes. "It must be allowed that some proverbs are great liars. One says, 'As insolent as a lackey,' and yet here is an individual practicing that calling, who nevertheless could not possibly be more polite. I shall never believe in proverbs again, or rather, I shall make a difference between them." And making himself this promise, Buvat found himself alone. Nothing makes a man so hungry as the sight of a good dinner. That which had just been eaten under the good man's very eyes surpassed in luxury everything that he had ever dreamed of, and he began, influenced by the decided calls of his stomach, to reproach himself for his too great defiance of his persecutors. But it was too late. Buvat, it is true, might have rung for Monsieur Bourguignon and requested a second dinner, but he was of too timid a character for that, and the result was that he had to search among his stock of proverbs for the most consoling, and having found between the situation and the proverb, "He who sleeps dines," an analogy which seemed to him most direct, he resolved to make use of it, and, as he could not dine, to endeavor at least to sleep. But at the moment of taking this resolution, Buvat found himself assailed by new fears. Could they not profit by his sleep to dispatch him? The night is a time of ambushes. He had often heard his mother tell of beds which, by the lowering of their canopies, smothered the unfortunate sleeper, of beds which sank through a trap so softly as not to wake the occupant. Finally, of secret doors opening in panels, and even in furniture, to give entrance to assassins. This luxuriant dinner, these rich wines, had they not been sent him to ensure a sounder sleep? All this was possible, nay, probable, and Buvat, who felt the instinct of self-preservation in the highest degree, took his candle and commenced a most minute investigation. After having opened the doors of all the cupboards, sounded all the paneling, Buvat had gone down on his hands and feet and was stretching his head timidly under the bed, when he thought he heard steps behind him. The position in which he found himself did not permit him to act on defensive. He therefore remained motionless and waited with a beating heart. After a few seconds of solemn silence, which filled Buvat with vague alarms, a voice said, "Your pardon, but is not monsieur looking for his nightcap?" Buvat was discovered. There was no means of escaping the danger, if danger there was. He therefore drew his head from under the bed, took his candle, and remaining on his knees, as a humble and beseeching posture, he turned toward the individual who had just addressed him, and found himself face to face with a man dressed in black, and carrying, folded up on his arm, many articles, which Buvat recognized as human clothes. "Yes, monsieur," said Buvat, seizing the opening which was offered to him, with a presence of mind on which he secretly congratulated himself. "Is that search forbidden? Why did not monsieur, instead of troubling himself, ring the bell? I have the honor to be appointed monsieur's valet de chamber, and I have brought him a nightcap and nightshirt." And with these words, the valet de chamber spread out on the bed a nightshirt, embroidered with flowers, a cap of the finest lawn, and a rose-colored ribbon. Buvat, still on his knees, regarded him with the greatest astonishment. "Now," said the valet de chamber, "will monsieur allow me to help him to undress?" "No, monsieur, no," said Buvat, accompanying the refusal with the sweetest smile he could assume. "No, I am accustomed to undress myself." "I thank you, monsieur." The valet de chamber retired, and Buvat remained alone. As the inspection of the room was completed, and as his increasing hunger rendered sleep more necessary, Buvat began to undress, sighing, placed, in order not to be left in the dark, a candle on the corner of the chimney-piece, and sprang, with a groan, into the softest and warmest bed he had ever slept on. The bed is not sleep, is an axiom which Buvat might, from experience, have added to the list of his true proverbs. Either from fear or hunger, Buvat passed a very disturbed night, and it was not till near morning that he fell asleep. Even then his slumbers were peopled with the most terrible visions and nightmares. He was just waking from a dream that he had been poisoned by a leg of mutton, when the valet de chamber entered and asked at what time he would like breakfast. Buvat was not in the habit of breakfasting in bed, so he rose quickly and dressed in haste. He had just finished when Messrs. Bourguignon and Comtois entered, bringing the breakfast, as the day before they had brought the dinner. Then took place a second rehearsal of the scene which we have before related, with the exception that now it was Monsieur Comtois who ate and Monsieur Bourguignon who waited. But when it came to the coffee, and Buvat, who had taken nothing for 24 hours, saw his dearly loved beverage, after having passed from the silver coffee pot into the porcelain cup, pass into the cavernous mouth of Monsieur Comtois, he could hold out no longer, and declared that his stomach demanded to be amused with something, and that, consequently, he desired that they would leave him the coffee and a roll. This declaration appeared to disturb the devotion of Monsieur Comtois, who was nevertheless obliged to satisfy himself with 1 cup of the odoriferous liquid, which, together with roll and the sugar, was placed on a little table, while the 2 scamps carried off the rest of the feast, laughing in their sleeves. Scarcely was the door closed when Buvat darted toward the little table, and, without even waiting to dip one into the other, ate the bread and drank the coffee. Then, a little comforted by that repast, insufficient as it was, began to look at things in a less gloomy point of view. In truth, Buvat was not wanting in a certain kind of good sense, and as he had passed the preceding evening and night and entered on the present morning, without interference, he began to understand that, though from some political motive they had deprived him of his liberty, they were far from wishing to shorten his days, and surrounded him, on the contrary, with cares of which he had never before been the object. He had seen that the dinner of the day before was better than his ordinary dinner, that the bed was softer than his ordinary bed, that the coffee he had just drunk possessed an aroma which the mixture of chicory took away from his, and he could not conceal from himself that the elastic couches and stuffed chairs which he had sat upon for the last 24 hours were much preferable to the hair sofa and cane chairs of his own establishment. The only thing, then, which remained to trouble him was the uneasiness which Bethil would feel at his not returning. He had for an instant the idea, not daring to renew the request which he had made the day before, to have news of him sent to his ward, of imitating the man with the iron mask, who had thrown a silver plate from the window of his prison onto the shore, by throwing a letter from his balcony into the courtyard of the Palais Royal. But he knew what a fatal result this infraction of the will of Monsieur de Saint-Mars had had for the unfortunate prisoner, so that he feared, by such an action, to increase the rigors of his captivity, which at present seemed to him tolerable. The result of all these reflections was that Buvat passed morning in a much less agitated manner than he had the evening and the night. Moreover, his hunger, appeased by the roll and the coffee, only existed in the form of that appetite, which is enjoyment when one is sure of a good dinner. Add to all this the particularly cheerful lookout which the prisoner had from his window, and it will be easily understood that midday arrived without too many sorrows or too much ennui. Exactly at 1 o'clock the door opened, and the table reappeared ready laid, and brought, like the day before and that morning, by the two valets. But this time it was neither Monsieur Bourguignon nor Monsieur Comtois who sat down to it. Buvat declared himself perfectly reassured concerning the intentions of his august host. He thanked Messrs. Comtois and Bourguignon for the devotion which each in turn had given him a proof, and begged them to wait upon him in their turn. The two servants made wry faces, but obeyed. It will be understood that the happy disposition in which Buvat now was became more blissful under the influence of a good dinner. Buvat ate all the eatables, drank all the drinkables, and at last, after having sipped his coffee, a luxury which he usually only allowed himself on Sundays, and having capped the Arabian nectar with a glass of Madamanful liquor, was, it must be confessed, in a state bordering upon ecstasy. That evening the supper was equally successful, but as Buvat had abandoned himself at dinner rather freely to consumption of chamber and ancillary, about 8 o'clock in the evening, he found himself in a state of glorification impossible to describe. The consequence was that when the valet de chambre entered, instead of finding him like the evening before, with his head on the bed, he found Buvat seated on a comfortable sofa, his feet on the hobs, his head leaning back, his eyes winking, and singing between his teeth with an expression of infinite tenderness, which, as may be seen, was a great improvement on the state of the worthy writer 24 hours before. Moreover, when the valet de chambre offered to help him to undress, Buvat, who found a slight difficulty in expressing his thoughts, contented himself with smiling in sign of approbation, then extended his arms to have his coat taken off, then his legs to have his slippers removed. But in spite of the state of exaltation, it is only just to Buvat to say that it was only when he found himself alone that he laid aside the rest of his garments. This time, contrary to what he had done the day before, he stretched himself out luxuriously in his bed and fell asleep in 5 minutes, and dreamed that he was a Grand Turk. He awoke as fresh as a rose, having only one trouble, the uneasiness a Bethil must experience, but otherwise perfectly happy. It may easily be imagined that the breakfast did not lessen his good spirits. On the contrary, being informed that he might write to Monsieur the Archbishop of Cambrai, he asked for paper and ink, which were brought him, took from his pocket his penknife, which never left him, cut his pen with the greatest care, and commenced, in his finest writing, a most touching request that if his captivity was to last, Bethil might be sent for, or at least that she might be informed that, except his liberty, he was in want of nothing, thanks to the kindness of the Prime Minister. This request, to the calligraphy of which Buvat had devoted no little care, and whose capital letters represented different plants, trees, or animals, occupied the worthy writer from breakfast till dinner. On sitting down at table, he gave the note to Bourguignon, who charged himself with carrying it to the Prime Minister, saying that Comtois would wait during his absence. In a quarter of an hour, Bourguignon returned and informed Beauvat that Monseigneur had gone out, but that, in his absence, the petition had been given to the person who aided him in his public affairs, and that person had requested that Monsieur Beauvat would come and see him as soon as he had finished his dinner, but hoped that Monsieur would not in any degree hurry himself, since he who made the request was dining himself. In accordance with this permission, Beauvat took his time, feasted on the best cookery, imbibed the most generous wines, sipped his coffee, played with his glass of liquor, and then, the last operation completed, declared in a resolute tone that he was ready to appear before the substitute of the Prime Minister. The sentinel had received orders to let him pass, so Beauvat, conducted by Bourguignon, passed proudly by him. For some time they followed a long corridor, then descended a staircase. At last a footman opened a door and announced Monsieur Beauvat. Beauvat found himself in a sort of laboratory, situated on the ground floor, with a man from 40 to 42, who was entirely unknown to him, and who was very simply dressed and occupied in following, at a blazing furnace, some chemical experiment, to which he appeared to attach great importance. This man, seeing Beauvat, raised his head, and having looked at him curiously, "Monsieur," said he, "are you Jean Beauvat?" "At your service, monsieur," answered Beauvat, bowing. "The request which you have just sent to the abbé is your handwriting?" "My own, monsieur. You write a fine hand." Beauvat bowed, with a proudly modest smile. "The abbé," continued the unknown, "has informed me of the services which you have rendered us." "Monseigneur is too good," murmured Beauvat. "It was not worth the trouble." "How? Not worth the trouble?" "Indeed, Monsieur Beauvat, it was, on the contrary, well worth the trouble, and the proof is that if you have any favor to ask from the Regent, I will charge myself with the message." "Monsieur," said Beauvat, "since you are so good as to offer to interpret my sentiments to His Royal Highness, have the kindness to request him, when he is less pressed, if it is not too inconvenient, to pay me my arrears." "How? Your arrears, Monsieur Beauvat? What do you mean?" "I mean, monsieur, that I have the honor to be employed at the Royal Library, but that for 6 years I have received no salary." "And how much do your arrears amount to?" "Monsieur, I must have a pen and ink to calculate exactly." "Oh, but something near the mark, calculate from memory, to 5,300 odd francs, besides the fractions of sous and deniers." "And you wish for payment, Monsieur Beauvat?" "I do not deny it, monsieur. It would give me great pleasure." "And is this all you ask?" "All." "But do you not ask anything for the service which you have just rendered France?" "Indeed, monsieur, I should like permission to let my ward Bathilde know that she may be easy on my account, and that I am a prisoner at the Palais Royal. I would also ask, if it would not be imposing upon your kindness too much, that she might be allowed to pay me a little visit. But if this second request is indiscreet, I will confine myself to the first." "We will do better than that. The causes for which you were retained exist no more, and we are going to set you at liberty. So you can go yourself to carry the news to Bathilde." "What, monsieur, what?" cried Beauvat. "Am I, then, no longer a prisoner? You can go when you like." "Monsieur, I am your very humble servant, and I have the honor of presenting you my respects." "Pardon, Monsieur Beauvat, one word more." "Two, monsieur. I repeat to you that France is under obligations to you, which she will acquit. Write, then, to the Regent, inform him of what is due to you, show him your situation, and if you have a particular desire for anything, say so boldly. I guarantee that he will grant your requests." "Monsieur, you are too good, and I shall not fail. I hope, then, that out of the first money which comes into the treasury, you will be paid. I give you my word." "Monsieur, this very day my petition shall be addressed to the Regent, and tomorrow you will be paid." "Ah, monsieur, what goodness!" "Go, Monsieur Beauvat, go. Your ward expects you." "You are right, monsieur, but she will lose nothing by having waited for me, since I bring her such good news. I may have the honor of seeing you again, monsieur." "Ah, pardon. Would it be an indiscretion to ask your name?" Monsieur Philippe. Au revoir, Monsieur Philippe. Adieu, Monsieur Buvat. One instant. I must give orders that they are to allow you to pass. At these words he rang. An usher appeared. Saint Revan. The usher went out. A few seconds afterward, a young officer of guards entered. Revan, said Monsieur Philippe, conduct this gentleman to the gate of the Palais Royal. There he is free to go where he wishes. Yes, Monseigneur, answered the young officer. A cloud passed over Buvat's eyes, and he opened his mouth to ask who it was that was being called Monseigneur. But Revan did not leave him time. Come, monsieur, said he. I await you. Buvat looked at Monsieur Philippe and the page with a stupefied air, but the latter, not understanding his hesitation, renewed his invitation to follow. Buvat obeyed, drawing out his handkerchief and wiping his forehead. At the door, the sentinel wished to stop Buvat. By the order of His Royal Highness, Monseigneur the Regent, Monsieur is free, said Revan. The soldier presented arms and allowed him to pass. Buvat thought he should faint. He felt his legs fail him and leaned against a wall. What is the matter, monsieur? Asked his guide. Pardon, monsieur, murmured Buvat. But who is the person to whom I have just had the honor of speaking? Monseigneur the Regent in person. Not possible. Not only possible, but true. What? It was the Regent himself who promised to pay me my arrears. I do not know what he promised you, but I know that the person who gave me the order to accompany you was the Regent. But he told me he was called Philippe. Well, he is Philippe d'Orleans. That is true, monsieur. That is true. Philippe is his Christian name. The Regent is a brave man, and when I remember that there exist scoundrels who conspire against him, against a man who has promised to pay me my arrears, but they deserve to be hanged, all of them, to be broken on the wheel, drawn and quartered, burned alive. Do not you think so, monsieur? Monsieur, said Revan, laughing, I have no opinion on matters of such importance. We are at the gate. I should be happy to accompany you further, but Monseigneur leaves in half an hour for the Abbey of Shells, and, as he has some orders to give me before his departure, I am, to my great regret, obliged to quit you. All the regret is on my side, monsieur, said Buvat graciously, and answering by a profound bow to the slight nod of the young man, who, when Buvat raised his head, had already disappeared. This departure left Buvat perfectly free in his movements, and he profited thereby to take his way down the Place des Victoires toward the Rue du Temps Perdu, round the corner which he turned at the very moment when Harmental ran his sword to the body of Roquefinette. It was at this moment that poor Bathilde, who was far from suspecting what was passing in her neighbor's room, had seen her guardian, and had rushed to meet him on the stairs, where Buvat and she had met at the third flight. "Oh, my dear, dear father," cried Bathilde, remounting the staircase in Buvat's arms, and stopping to embrace him at every step. "Where have you been? What has happened? How is it that we have not seen you since Monday? What uneasiness you have caused us. Mon Dieu, but something extraordinary must have occurred." "Yes, most extraordinary," answered Buvat. "Ah, mon Dieu, tell then me, first, where do you come from?" "From the Palais Royal." "What?" "From the Palais Royal. And with whom were you stopping at the Palais Royal?" "The Regent." "You with the Regent? And what about?" "I was a prisoner." "A prisoner, you?" "A state prisoner." "And why were you a prisoner?" "Because I have saved France." "Oh, father, are you mad?" cried Bathilde, terrified. "No, but there's been enough to make me so if I had not had a pretty strong head." "Oh, explain, for God's sake." "Fancy that there was a conspiracy against the Regent." "Oh, mon Dieu!" "And that I belonged to it." "You?" "Yes, I, without being, that is to say, you know that Prince de Lisney?" "Well, a sham prince, my child, a sham prince." "But the copies which you made for him? Manifestos, proclamations, incendiary papers, a general revolt, Brittany, Normandy, the States General. King of Spain, I had discovered all this." "You?" cried Bathilde, horrified. "Yes, I. And the Regent has called me the savior of France, me, and is going to pay me my arrears." My father, you talk of conspirators. Do you remember the name of any of them?" Firstly, Monsieur the Duc de Maine. Fancy that miserable bastard conspiring against a man like Monseigneur the Regent. Then a Count de Laval, a Marquis de Pompadour, a Baron de Valef, the Prince de Celamore, the Abbé Brigade, that abominable Abbé Brigade. Think of my having copied the list. My father, said Bathilde, shuddering with fear. My father, among all those names, did you not see the name of Chevalier Raoul de Harmental? That I did, cried Bivat. The Chevalier Raoul de Harmental. Why is ahead of the company? But the regent knows them all, and this very evening they will all be arrested and tomorrow hanged, drawn, quartered, broken on the wheel. Oh, luckless, shameful that you are, cried Bathilde, wringing her hands wildly. You have killed a man whom I love, but I swear to you, by the memory of my mother, that if he dies, I will die also. And thinking that she might still be in time to warn D'Harmental the danger which threatened him, Bathilde left Bivat confounded, darted to the door, flew down the staircase, cleared the street at 2 bounds, rushed up the stairs, and breathless, terrified, dying, hurled herself against the door of D'Harmental's room, which, badly closed by the Chevalier, yielded before her, exposing to her view the body of the captain stretched on the floor and swimming in a sea of blood. At this sight, so widely different from what she expected, Bathilde, not thinking that she might perhaps be compromising her lover, sprang toward the door, calling for help, but on reaching the threshold, either from weakness or from the blood, her foot slipped and she fell backward with a terrible cry. The neighbors came running in the direction of the cry and found that Bathilde had fainted, and that her head, in falling against the angle of the door, had been badly wounded. They carried Bathilde to Madame Denis's room, and the good woman hastened to offer her hospitality. As to Captain Roquefort, as he had torn off the address of the letter which he had in his pocket to light his pipe with, and had no other paper to indicate his name or residence, they carried his body to the morgue, where, 3 days afterward, it was recognized by La Normande. Chapter 38. God disposes. D'Harmental, as we have seen, had set off at a gallop, feeling that he had not an instant to lose in bringing about the changes which the death of Captain Roquefort rendered necessary in his hazardous enterprise. In the hope of recognizing by some sign the individuals who were destined to play the part of supernumeraries in this great drama, he followed the boulevards as far as the Porte Saint-Martin, and having arrived there, turned to the left and was in the midst of the horse market. It was there, it will be remembered, that the 12 or 15 sham peasants enlisted by Roquefort waited the orders of their captain. But, as the deceased had said, no sign pointed out to the eye of the stranger who were the men, clothed like the rest, and scarcely known to each other. D'Harmental, therefore, sought vainly. All the faces were unknown to him. Buyers and sellers appeared equally indifferent to everything except the bargains which they were concluding. Twice or thrice, after having approached persons whom he fancied he recognized as false bargainers, he went away without even speaking to them. So great was the probability that, among the 500 or 600 individuals who were on the ground, the Chevalier would make some mistake which might be not only useless, but even dangerous. The situation was pitiable. D'Harmental unquestionably had there, ready to his hand, all the means necessary to the happy completion of his plot. But he had, in killing the captain, broken with his own hand the thread which should have served him as a clue to them, and the center link broken, the whole chain had become useless. D'Harmental bit his lips till the blood came, and wandered to and fro, from end to end of the market, still hoping that some unforeseen event would get him out of his difficulty. Time, however, flowed away. The market presented the same aspect. No one spoke to him, and 2 peasants to whom despair had caused him to address some ambiguous words had opened their eyes and mouths in such profound astonishment that he had instantly broken off a conversation, convinced that he was mistaken. 5 o'clock struck. At 8 or 9 the regent would repair the shells. There was therefore no time to be lost, particularly as this ambuscade was a last resource for conspirators, who might be arrested at any moment, and who staked their remaining hopes on this last throw. D'Harmental did not conceal from himself the difficulties of the situation. He had claimed for himself the honor of the enterprise. On him therefore rested all the responsibility, and that responsibility was terrible. On the other hand, he found himself in one of those situations where courage is useless, and where human will shatters itself against an impossibility, and we're the last chance to confess one's weakness and ask aid from those who expect it of us. But Harmental was a man of determination. His resolution was soon taken. He took a last turn round the market to see if some conspirator would not betray himself by his impatience. But, seeing that all faces retained their expression of unconcern, he put his horse to the gallop, rode down the boulevards, gained the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, dismounted at number 15, went up the staircase, opened the door of a little room, and found himself in the company of Madame de Maine, Laval, Valif, Pompadour, Milesieux, and Brigade. A general cry arose on seeing him. Harmental related everything. The pretensions of Roquevanet, the discussion which had followed, the duel which had terminated that discussion. He opened his cloak and showed his shirt saturated with blood. Then he passed the hopes which he had entertained of recognizing the sham peasants, and putting himself at their head in place of the captain. He showed his hopes destroyed, his investigations useless, and wound up by an appeal to Laval, Pompadour, and Valif, who answered that they were ready to follow the Chevalier to the end of the earth, and to obey his orders. Nothing was lost, then, for resolute men, acting on their own account, were 12 or 15 hired vagabonds, who were not influenced by any motive beyond that of gaining some 100 louis apiece. The horses were ready in the stable. Every one had come armed. Davranches was not yet gone, which reinforced a little troop by another devoted man. They sent for masks of black velvet, so as to hide from the region as long as possible who his enemies were, left with Madame de Maine Milesieux, who from his age, and Brigade, who from his profession, were naturally excluded from such an expedition, fixed a rendezvous at Saint-Mandé, and left each one separately, so as not to arouse suspicions. An hour afterward the 5 friends were reunited, and ambushed on the road to Chelles, between Vincennes and Nogent-sur-Marne. 6:30 struck on the chateau clock. Davranches had been in search of information. The Regent had passed about 3:30. He had neither guards nor suite. He was in a carriage and 4, ridden by 2 jockeys, and preceded by a single outrider. There was no resistance to be feared. On arresting the prince, they would turn his course toward Charenton, where the postmaster was, as we have said, in the interest of Madame de Maine, take him into the courtyard, whose door would close upon him, force him to enter a traveling carriage, which would be waiting with a postilion in his saddle. Harmental and Valif would seat themselves by him. They would cross the Marne at Alfort, the Seine at Villeneuve-Saint-Georges, reach Grand Vaux then, Monthery, and find themselves on a road to Spain. If at any of the villages where they changed horses the Regent endeavored to call out, Harmental and Valif would threaten him. And, if he called out in spite of menaces, they had that famous passport to prove that he who claimed assistance was not the prince, but only a madman who thought himself the Regent, and whom they were conducting to his family, who lived at Saragossa. Davranches had been in search of information. The Regent had passed about 3:30. He had neither guards nor suite. He was in a carriage and 4, ridden by 2 jockeys, and preceded by a single outrider. All this was a little dangerous, it is true, but, as is well known, these are the very enterprises which succeed so much the easier from their unforeseen audacity. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, struck successively. Harmental and his companions saw with pleasure the night approaching, and the darkness falling more and more dense and black around them. 2 or 3 carriages had already given false alarms, but it had no other effect than preparing them for the real attack. At 8:30 the night was pitch dark, and a sort of natural fear, which the conspirators had felt at first, began to change into impatience. At 9 o'clock they thought they could distinguish sounds. Davranches lay down, with his ear to the ground, and distinctly heard the rolling of a carriage. At that instant they saw, at about 1,000 paces from the angled road, a point of light like a star. The conspirators trembled with excitement. It was evidently the outrider with his torch. There was soon no doubt. They saw the carriage with 2 lanterns. Harmental, Pompadour, Valif, and Laval grasped one another's hands, put on their masks, and each one took the place assigned to him. The carriage advanced rapidly. It was really that of the Duke. By the light of the torch which he carried, they could distinguish the red dress of the outrider, some 25 paces before the horses. The road was silent and deserted. Everything was favorable. Harmental threw a last glance on his companions. Davranches was in the middle of the road, pretending to be drunk, Laval and Pompadour on each side of the path, and opposite Envalef, who was cocking his pistols. As to the outrider, the two jockeys and the prince, it was evident that they were all in a state of perfect security, and would fall quietly into the trap. The carriage still advanced. Already the outrider had passed Harmental and Envalef. Suddenly he struck against Davranches, who sprang up, seized the bridle, snatched the torch from his hand, and extinguished it. At this sight the jockeys tried to turn the carriage, but it was too late. Pompadour and Laval sprang upon them pistol in hand, while Harmental and Envalef presented themselves at the two doors, extinguished the lanterns, and intimated to the prince that he did not make any resistance his life would be spared, but that if on the contrary he defended himself or cried out, they were determined to proceed to extremities. Contrary to the expectation of Harmental and Envalef, who knew the courage of the regent, the prince only said, "Well, gentlemen, do not harm me. I will go wherever you wish." Harmental and Envalef threw a glance at the road. They saw Pompadour and Davranches leading into the depth of the wood the outrider, the two jockeys, the outrider's horse, and two of the carriage horses which they had unharnessed. The Chevalier sprang from his horse, mounted at the first postilion. Laval and Envalef placed themselves before the doors. The carriage set off at a gallop, and taking the first turn to the left, began to roll, without noise and without light, in the direction of Charenton. All the arrangements had been so perfect that the seizure had not occupied more than 5 minutes. No resistance had been made, not a cry had been uttered. Most assuredly, this time fortune was on the side of the conspirators. But having arrived at the end of the crossroad, Harmental encountered a first obstacle. The barrier, either by accident or design, was closed, and they were obliged to retrace their steps and take another road. The Chevalier turned his horses, took a lateral alley, and the journey, interrupted for an instant, recommenced at an increased speed. The new route which the Chevalier had taken led him to a four-cross road. One of the roads led straight to Charenton. There was no time to lose, and in any event he must traverse this square. For an instant he thought he distinguished men in the darkness before him, but this vision disappeared like a mist, and the carriage continued its progress without interruption. On approaching the crossroads, Harmental fancied he heard the neighing of a horse, and a sort of ringing of iron, like sabers being drawn from their sheaths, but either taking for the wind among the leaves, or for some other noise for which he need not stop. He continued with the same swiftness, the same silence, and in the midst of the same darkness. But, having arrived at the crossroads, Harmental noticed a singular circumstance. A sort of wall seemed to close all the roads. Something was happening. Harmental stopped the carriage, and wished to return by the road he had come down. But a similar wall had closed behind him. At that instant he heard the voices of Laval and Envalef crying, "We are surrounded. Save yourself." And both left the doors, leaped their horses over the ditch, darted into the forest, and disappeared among the trees. But it was impossible for Harmental, who was mounted on the postilion's horse, to follow his companions, and, not being able to escape the living wall, which the Chevalier recognized as a regiment of musketeers, he tried to break through it, and with his head lowered and a pistol in each hand, spurred his horse up the nearest road, without considering whether it was the right one. He had scarcely gone 10 steps, however, when a musket ball entered the head of his horse, which fell, entangling Harmental's leg. Instantly 8 or 10 cavaliers sprang upon him. He fired one pistol by hazard and put the other to his head, to blow his brains out, but he had not time, for 2 musketeers seized him by the arms, and 4 others dragged him from beneath the horse. The pretended prince descended from the carriage, and turned out to be a valet in disguise. They placed Harmental with 2 officers inside the carriage, and harnessed another horse in the place of the one which had been shot. The carriage once more moved forward, taking a new direction, and escorted by a squadron of musketeers. A quarter of an hour afterward it rolled over a drawbridge. A heavy door grated upon its hinges, and Harmental passed under a somber and vaulted gateway, on the inner side of which an officer in the uniform of colonel was waiting for him. It was Monsieur de Launay, the governor of the Bastille. If our readers desire to know how the plot had been discovered, they must recall the conversation between Dubois and La Filin, the gossip of the prime minister. It will be remembered, suspected Roquefinette of being mixed up in some illicit proceeding, and had denounced him on condition of his life being spared. A few days afterward, Harmental came to her house, and she recognized him as the young man who had held the former conference with Roquefort. She had consequently mounted the stairs behind him, and, going into the next room, had, by aid of a whole board and petition, heard everything. What she had heard was the project for carrying off the regent on his return from Chelles. Du Bois had been informed the same evening, and, in order to take the conspirators in the act, had put a suit of the regent's clothes on Monsieur Bourguignon, and, having surrounded the Bois de Vincennes with a regiment of grey musketeers, besides light horse and dragoons, had produced the result we have just related. The head of the plot had been taken in the fact, and as the Prime Minister knew the names of all conspirators, there was little chance remaining for them of escape from the meshes of the vast net which was hourly closing around them. Chapter 39. A Prime Minister's Memory. When Bathilde reopened her eyes, she found herself in Mademoiselle Emily's room. Mirza was lying on the end of the bed. The two sisters were one at each side of her pillow, and Beauvat, overcome by grief, was sitting in a corner, his head bent, and his hands resting on his knees. At first, all her thoughts were confused, and her sensation was one of bodily pain. She raised her hand to her head. The wound was behind the temple. A doctor, who had been called in, had arranged the first dressing, and left orders that he was to be sent for a fever declared itself. Astonished to find herself, on waking from a sleep which had appeared to her heavy and painful, in bed in a strange room, the young girl turned an inquiring glance on each person present, but Emily and Athenais shunned her eyes, and Beauvat heaved a mournful sigh. Mirza alone stretched out her little head for a caress. Unluckily for the coaxing little creature, Bathilde began to recover her memory. The veil which was drawn before the late events rose little by little, and soon she began to connect the broken threads which might guide her in the past. She recalled the return of Beauvat, what he had told her of the conspiracy, the danger which would result to Harmental from the revelation he had made. Then she remembered her hope of being in time to save him, the rapidity with which she had crossed the street and mounted the staircase. Lastly, her entry into Raoul's room returned to her memory, and once more she found herself before the corpse of Roquefort. And he, she cried, what has become of him? No one answered, for neither of the three persons who were in the room knew what reply to give. Only Beauvat, choking with tears, rose and went toward the door. Bathilde understood the grief and remorse expressed in that mute withdrawal. She stopped him by a look and extending her arms toward him. "My father," said she, "do you no longer love your poor Bathilde?" "I no longer love you, my darling child," cried Beauvat, falling on his knees and kissing her hand. "I love you no longer. My God, it will be you who will not love me now, and you will be right, for I am worthless. I ought to have known that that young man loved you, and ought to have risked all, suffered all, rather than. But you told me nothing. You had no confidence in me, and I, with the best intentions in the world, made nothing but mistakes. Oh, unlucky, unhappy, that I am. You will never forgive me, and then, how shall I live?" "Father," cried Bathilde, "for heaven's sake, try and find out what has happened." "Well, my child, well, I will discover. Will not you forgive me if I bring you good news? If the news is bad, you will hate me even more. That will but be just, but you will not die, Bathilde." "Go, go," said Bathilde, throwing her arms round his neck, and giving him a kiss in which 15 years of gratitude struggled with 1 day of pain. "Go. My existence is in the hands of God. He only can decide whether I shall live or die." Beauvat understood nothing of all this but the kiss, and, having inquired of Madame Denis how the Chevalier had been dressed, he set out on his quest. It was no easy matter for a detective so simple as Beauvat to trace Raoul's progress. He had learned from a neighbor that he had been seen to spring upon a gray horse which had remained some half-hour fastened to the shutter, and that he had turned round the Rue Gros Chenet. A grocer, who lived at the corner of the Rue de Jeuneurs, remembered having seen a cavalier, whose person and horse agreed perfectly with the description given by Beauvat, passed by at full gallop. And lastly, a fruit woman, who kept a little shop at the corner of the boulevards, swore positively that she had seen the man, and that he had disappeared by the Porte Saint-Denis. But from this point all the information was vague, unsatisfactory and uncertain, so that, after 2 hours of useless inquiry, Beauvat returned to Madame Denis's house, without any more definite information to give Bathilde than that, wherever Harmental might be gone, he had passed along the Boulevard Bonne Nouvelle. Buvat found his ward much agitated. During his absence, she had grown rapidly worse, and the crisis foreseen by the doctor was fast approaching. Bathilde's eyes flashed. Her skin seemed to glow. Her words were short and firm. Madame Denis had just sent for the doctor. The poor woman was not without her own anxieties. For some time she had suspected that the Abbé Brigaud was mixed up in some plot, and what she had just learned, that Harmental was not a poor student but a rich colonel, confirmed her conjectures, since it had been Brigaud who had introduced him to her. This similarity of position had not a little contributed to soften her heart, always kind, toward Bathilde. She listened then with eagerness to the little information which Buvat had been able to collect for the sufferer, and, as it was far from being sufficiently positive to calm the patient, she promised, if she heard anything herself, to report directly. In the meantime, the doctor arrived. Great as was his command over himself, it was easy to see that he thought Bathilde in some danger. He bled her abundantly, ordered refreshing drinks, and advised that someone should watch at the bedside. Emily and Athanase, who, their little absurdities accepted, were excellent girls, declared directly that that was their business, and that they would pass the night with Bathilde alternately. Emily, as eldest, claimed the first watch, which was given her without contest. As to Buvat, since he could not remain in the room, they asked him to return home, a thing to which he would not consent till Bathilde herself had begged it. The bleeding had somewhat calmed her, and she seemed to feel better. Madame Denis had left the room. Mademoiselle Athanase also had retired. Monsieur Boniface, after returning from the morgue, where he had been to pay a visit to the body of Roquefinette, had mounted to his own room, and Emily watched by the fireplace and read a little book which she took from her pocket. She shortly heard a movement in the bed and ran toward it. Then, after an instant's silence, during which she heard the opening and shutting of 2 or 3 doors, and before she had time to say, "That is not the voice of Monsieur Raoul, it is the Abbé Brigaud," Bathilde had fallen back on her pillow. An instant afterward, Madame Denis half opened the door, and in a trembling voice called Emily, who kissed Bathilde and went out. Suddenly, Bathilde was aroused. The Abbé was in the room next to hers, and she thought that she heard him pronounce Raoul's name. She now remembered having several times seen the Abbé at Harmental's rooms. She knew that he was one of the most intimate friends of Madame de Maine. She thought then that the Abbé must bring news of him. Her first idea was to slip from the bed, put on a dressing gown, and go and ask what had happened. But she considered that if the news was bad, they would not tell it, and that it would be better to overhear the conversation, which appeared animated. Consequently, she pressed her ear to the panel, and listened as if her whole life had been spent in cultivating that single sense. Brigaud was relating to Madame Denis what had happened. Valef had made his way to the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, and given warning to Madame de Maine of the failure of the expedition. Madame de Maine had immediately freed the conspirators from their oaths, advised Milesiaux and Brigaud to save themselves, and retired to the arsenal. Brigaud came therefore to bid adieu to Madame Denis. He was going to attempt to reach Spain in the disguise of a peddler. In the midst of his recital, interrupted by the exclamation of poor Madame Denis and of Mademoiselle Athanase and Emily, the Abbé thought that he heard a cry in the next room, just at the time when he was relating Harmental's catastrophe. But as no one had paid any attention to cry, and as he was not aware of Bathilde's being there, he had attached no importance to this noise, regarding the nature of which he might easily have been mistaken. Moreover, Boniface, summoned in his turn, had entered at the moment, and, as the Abbé had a particular fancy for Boniface, his entrance had naturally turned Brigaud's thoughts into a different channel. Still, this was not the time for long leave-takings. Brigaud desired that daylight should find him as far as possible from Paris. He took leave of the Denis family, and set out with Boniface, who declared that he would accompany friend Brigaud as far as the barrier. As they opened the staircase door, they heard the voice of the portress, who appeared to be opposing the passage of someone. They descended to discover the cause of the discussion, and found Bathilde, with streaming hair, naked feet, and wrapped in a long white robe, standing on the staircase and endeavoring to go out in spite of the efforts of the portress. The poor girl had heard everything. The fever had changed into delirium. She would join Raoul. She would see him again. She would die with him. The 3 women took her in their arms. For a minute she struggled against them, murmuring incoherent words. Her cheeks were flushed with fever. while her limbs trembled and her teeth chattered. But soon her strength failed her. Her head sank back, and, calling on the name of Raoul, she fainted a second time. They sent once more for the doctor. What he had feared was now no longer doubtful. Brain fever had declared itself. At this moment someone knocked. It was Buvat, whom Brigod and Boniface had found wandering to and fro before the house like a ghost, and who, not able to keep up any longer, had come to beg a seat in some corner. He did not care where, so long as from time to time he had news of Bathilde. The poor family were too sad themselves not to feel for the grief of others. Madame signed to Buvat to seat himself in a corner, and retired into her own room with Athenais, leaving Emily once more with the sufferer. About daybreak Boniface returned. He had gone with Brigod as far as the Barrier d'Offer, where the abbé had left him, hoping, thanks to his good steed and to his disguise, to reach the Spanish frontier. Bathilde's delirium continued. All night she talked of Raoul. She often mentioned Buvat's name, and always accused him of having killed her lover. Buvat heard it, and, without daring to defend himself, to reply, or even to groan, had silently burst into tears, and, pondering on what means existed of repairing the evil he had caused, he at last arrived at a desperate resolution. He approached the bed, kissed the feverish hand of Bathilde, who did not recognize him, and went out. Buvat had, in fact, determined on a bold course. It was to go himself to Dubois, tell him everything, and ask, as his recompense, not the payment of his arrears, not advancement at the library, but pardon for Harmental. It was the least that could be accorded to the man whom the regent himself had called the savior of France. Buvat did not doubt that he should soon return bearing good news, and that it would restore Bathilde to health. Consequently, Buvat went home to arrange his disordered dress, which bore the marks of the event of the day and the emotions of the night. And moreover, he did not dare present himself at the minister's house so early, for fear of disturbing him. His toilet finished, and as it was still only 9 o'clock, he returned for a few minutes to Bathilde's room. It was that which the young girl had left the day before. Buvat sat down in the chair which she had quitted, touched the articles which she liked to touch, kissed the feet of the crucifix, which she kissed each night. One would have thought him a lover following the steps of his mistress. 10 o'clock struck. It was the hour at which Buvat had often before repaired to the Palais Royal. The fear of being importunate gave place to the hope of being received as he had always been. He took his hat and cane, and called at Madame Denis's to ask how Bathilde had been during his absence. He found that she had never ceased to call for Raoul. The doctor had bled her for the 3rd time. He raised his eyes to heaven, heaved a profound sigh, and set out for the Palais Royal. The moment was unlucky. Dubois, who had been constantly on his feet for 4 or 5 days, suffered horribly from a malady which was to cause his death in a few months. Moreover, he was beyond measure annoyed that only Harmental had been taken, and had just given orders to Leblanc and Dargenson to press on the trial with all possible speed. His valet de chambre, who was accustomed to see the worthy writer arrive every morning, announced M. Buvat. And who the devil is M. Buvat? It is I, Monseigneur, said the poor fellow, venturing to slip between the valet and the door, and bowing his honest head before the Prime Minister. Well, who are you? Asked Dubois, as if he had never seen him before. What, Monseigneur? Exclaimed the astonished Buvat. Do you not recognize me? I come to congratulate you on the discovery of the conspiracy. I get congratulations enough of that kind. Thanks for yours, M. Buvat, said Dubois quietly. But, Monseigneur, I come also to ask a favor. A favor? And on what grounds? Monseigneur, stammered Buvat. But, Monseigneur, do you not remember that you promised me a recompense? A recompense to you, you double idiot. What? Monseigneur, continued poor Buvat, getting more and more frightened, do you not recollect that you told me here, in this very room, that I had my fortune at my fingers' ends? And now, said Dubois, I tell you that you have your life in your legs, for unless you decamp pretty quick. But, Monseigneur, you reason with me. Scoundrel, shouted Dubois, raising himself with one hand on the arm of his chair and the other on his archbishop's crook. Wait, then, you shall see. Buvat had seen quite enough. At the threatening gesture of the premier, he understood what was to follow, and turning round, he fled at full speed. But quick as he had still time to hear Du Bois, with the most horrible oaths and curses, order his valet to beat him to death if ever again he put his foot inside the door of the Palais Royal. Buvat understood that there was no hope in that direction, and that not only must he renounce the idea of being of service to Harmental, but also the payment of his arrears, in which he had fondly trusted. This chain of thought naturally reminded him that for 8 days he had not been to the library. He was near there. He resolved to go to his office, if it was only to excuse himself to his superior and relate to him the causes of his absence. But here a grief, not less terrible than the rest, was in store for Buvat. On opening the door of his office, he saw his seat occupied. A stranger had been appointed to his place. As he had never before, during the whole 15 years, been an hour late, the curator had imagined him dead and had replaced him. Buvat had lost the situation for having saved France. This last stroke was more than he could bear, and Buvat returned home almost as ill as Bathilde. Chapter 40. Boniface. As we have seen, Du Bois urged on the trial of Harmental, hoping that his revelations would furnish him with weapons against those whom he wished to attack. But Harmental took refuge in a total denial with respect to others. As to what concerned himself personally, he confessed everything, saying that his attempt on the regent was a result of private revenge, a revenge which had arisen from the injustice which had been done him in depriving him of his regiment. As to the men who had accompanied him, and who had lent him their aid in the execution of his plans, he declared that they were poor devils of peasants, who did not even know whom they were escorting. All this was not highly probable, but there was no means of bringing anything beyond the answers of the accused to bear on the matter. The consequence was that, to the infinite annoyance of Du Bois, the real criminals escaped his vengeance, under cover of the eternal denials of the Chevalier, who denied having seen Monsieur or Madame de Maine more than once or twice in his life, or ever having been trusted with any political mission by either of them. They had arrested successively Laval, Pompadour, and Walef, and had taken them to the Bastille, but they knew that they might rely upon the Chevalier, and as the situation in which they found themselves had been foreseen, and it had been agreed what each should say, they all entirely denied any knowledge of the affair, confessing associations with Monsieur and Madame de Maine, but saying that those associations were confined to a respectful friendship. As to Harmental, they knew him, they said, for a man of honor, who complained of a great injustice which had been done to him. They were confronted, one after the other, with the Chevalier, but these interviews had no other result than that of confirming each in his system of defense, and showing each that the system was religiously adhered to by his companion. Du Bois was furious. He reopened the proofs of the affair of the States General, but that had been settled by the Special Parliament, which had condemned the King of Spain's letters and degraded the legitimated princes from their rank. Everyone regarded them as sufficiently punished by this judgment, without raising a second prosecution against them on the same grounds. Du Bois had hoped, by the revelations of Harmental, to entangle Monsieur and Madame de Maine in a new trial more serious than the first, for this time was a question of a direct attempt, if not on the life, at least on the liberty of the regent. But the obstinacy of the Chevalier destroyed all his hopes. His anger had therefore turned solely on Harmental, and, as we have said, he had ordered Leblanc and D'Argenson to expedite the prosecution, an order which the two magistrates had obeyed with their ordinary punctuality. During this time, the illness of Bathilde had progressed in a manner which had brought the poor girl to death's door, but at last youth and vigor had triumphed. To the excitement of delirium had succeeded a complete and utter prostration. One would have said that the fever alone had sustained her, and that in departing it had taken life along with it. Still, every day brought improvement, slight, it is true, but decided, to the eyes of the good people who surrounded the bed of sickness. Little by little Bathilde began to recognize those who were about her. Then she had stretched out her hand to them, and then spoken to them. As yet, to the astonishment of everyone, they had remarked that Bathilde had not mentioned the name of Harmental. This was a great relief to those who watched her, for, as they had none but sad news to give her about him, they preferred, as will easily be understood, that she should remain silent on the subject. Everyone believed, and the doctor most of all, that the young girl had completely forgotten the past, or, if she remembered it, that she confounded the reality with the dreams of her delirium. They were all wrong. Even the doctor. This was what had occurred. One morning, when they had thought Bathilde sleeping and had left her alone for a minute, Boniface, who, in spite of the severity of his neighbor, still preserved a great fund of tenderness toward her, had, as was his custom every morning since she had been ill, half opened the door to ask news of her. The growling of Mirza aroused Bathilde, who turned round and saw Boniface, and having before conjectured that she might probably know from him that which she should ask in vain from the others, namely, what had become of Harmental, she had, while quieting Mirza, extend her pale and emaciated hand to Boniface. Boniface took it between his own two great red hands, then, looking at the young girl and shaking his head, "Yes, Mademoiselle Bathilde, yes," said he. "You were right. You are a lady, and I am only a coarse peasant. You deserved a nobleman, and it was impossible that you should love me. As you wish, true, Boniface, but I can love you in another manner." "True, Mademoiselle Bathilde, very true. Well, love me as you will, so that you love me a little. I can love you as a brother. As a brother, you could love poor Boniface as a brother, and he might love you as a sister. He might sometimes hold your hand as he holds it now, and embrace you as he sometimes embraces Mealy and Nyes. Oh, speak, Mademoiselle Bathilde, what must I do for that?" "My friend," said Bathilde. "She has called me her friend," said Boniface. "She has called me her friend. I, who have said such things about her. Listen, Mademoiselle Bathilde. Do not call me your friend. I am not worthy of a name. You do not know what I have said. I said that you live with an old man, but I did not believe it, Mademoiselle Bathilde. On my honor, I did not. It was anger, it was rage. Mademoiselle Bathilde, call me beggar rascal. It will give me less pain than to hear you term me your friend." "My friend," recommenced Bathilde, "if you have said all that, I pardon you, for now not only can you make up for it, but also acquire eternal claims upon my gratitude. And what shall I do? Speak. Let me see. Must I go through the fire? Shall I jump out of the second-floor window? What shall I do? Tell me. Everything is alike. No, my friend, something much easier. Speak, Mademoiselle Bathilde, speak. First, it is necessary that you should swear to do it. I swear by heaven. Whatever they may say to hinder you, hinder me from doing what you ask. Never, whatever may be the grief that it may cause me. No, that is a different thing. If it is to give you pain, I would rather be cut in half. But if I beg you, my friend, my brother," said Bathilde, in her most persuasive voice. "Oh, if you speak like that, I shall cry like the fountain of the innocents." And Boniface began to sob. "You will tell me all then, my dear Boniface?" "Everything." "Well, tell me first." Bathilde stopped. "What? Can you not imagine, Boniface?" "Yes, I think so. You want to know what has become of M. Raoul, do you not?" "Oh, yes," cried Bathilde. "In heaven's name, what has become of him?" "Poor fellow," murmured Boniface. "Mon Dieu, is he dead?" exclaimed Bathilde, sitting up in the bed. "No, happily not, but he is a prisoner." "Where?" "In the Bastille." "I feared it," said Bathilde, sinking down in the bed. "In the Bastille. Oh, mon Dieu, mon Dieu." "Oh, now you are crying, Mademoiselle Bathilde." "And I am here in this bed, chained, dying," cried Bathilde. "Oh, do not cry like that, mademoiselle. It is your poor Boniface who begs you." "No, I will be firm. I will have courage. See, Boniface, I weep no longer, but you understand that I must know everything from hour to hour, so that when he dies, I may die." "You die, Mademoiselle Bathilde." "Oh, never, never." "You have promised, you have sworn it. Boniface, you will keep me informed of all?" "Oh, wretch that I am, what have I promised?" "And if it must be at the moment, the terrible moment, you will aid me, you will conduct me, will you not, Boniface? I must see him again, once more, if it be on the scaffold." "I will do all you desire, mademoiselle," said Boniface, falling on his knees and trying vainly to restrain his sobs. "You promise me?" "I swear." "Silence. Someone is coming. Not a word of this. It is a secret between us two. Rise, wipe your eyes, do as I do, and leave me." And Bathilde began to laugh with a feverish nervousness that was frightful to see. Luckily, it was only Buvat, and Boniface profited by his entrance to depart. Well, how are you? Asked the good man. Better, father, much better. I feel my strength returning. In a few days I shall be able to rise. But you, father, why do you not go to the office? Buvat sighed deeply. It was kind not to leave me when I was ill, but now I am getting better. You must return to the library, father. Yes, my child, yes, said Buvat, swallowing his sobs. Yes, I am going. Are you going without kissing me? No, my child, on the contrary. Why, father, you are crying, and yet you see that I am better. I cry, said Buvat, wiping his eyes with his handkerchief. I crying. If I am crying, it is only joy. Yes, I am going, my child, to my office. I am going. And Buvat, after having embraced Bathilde, returned home, for he would not tell his poor child that he had lost his place, and the young girl was left alone. Then she breathed more freely now that she was tranquil. Boniface, in his quality of clerk to the procureur Chevalier, was in the very place to know everything, and Bathilde was sure that Boniface would tell her everything. Indeed, from that time she knew all, that Raoul had been interrogated, and that he had taken everything on himself. Then the day following she learned that he had been confronted with Laval, Volif, and Pompadour, but that interview had produced nothing. Faithful to his promise, Boniface every evening brought her the day's news, and every evening Bathilde, at this recital, alarming as it was, felt inspired with new resolution. A fortnight passed thus, at the end of which time Bathilde began to get up and walk a little about the room, to the great joy of Buvat, Nanette, and the whole Denis family. One day Boniface, contrary to his usual habit, returned home from Julius at 3 o'clock, and entered the room of the sufferer. The poor boy was so pale and so cast down that Bathilde understood that he brought some terrible information, and giving a cry, she rose upright, with her eyes fixed on him. All is finished, then? Asked Bathilde. Alas, answered Boniface, it is all through his own obstinacy. They offered him pardon. Do you understand, Mademoiselle Bathilde? His pardon if he would, and he would not speak a word. Then, cried Bathilde, no more hope. He is condemned. This morning, Mademoiselle Bathilde, this morning, to death. Boniface bowed his head. And when is he to be executed? Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Very well, said Bathilde. But perhaps there is still hope, said Boniface. What? Asked Bathilde. If even now he would denounce his accomplices. The young girl began to laugh, but so strangely that Boniface shuddered from head to foot. Well, said Boniface, who knows? I, if I was in his place, for example, should not fail to do so. I should say, it was not I, on my honor was not I. It was such a one and such another and so on. Boniface, I must go out. You, Mademoiselle Bathilde, cried Boniface, terrified. You go out. Why, it would kill you. I say I must go out. But you cannot stand upright. You are wrong, Boniface. I am strong. See. And Bathilde began to walk up and down the room with a firm step. Moreover, added Bathilde, you will go and fetch a coach. But, Mademoiselle Bathilde, Boniface, said the young girl, you have promised to obey me. Till this minute you have kept your word. Are you getting lax in your devotion? I, Mademoiselle Bathilde, I lax in my devotion to you. You ask for a coach, I will fetch two. Go, my friend, my brother, said Bathilde. Oh, Mademoiselle Bathilde, with such words you could make me do what you liked. In 5 minutes the coach will be here. And Boniface ran out. Bathilde had on a loose white robe. She tied it in with a girdle, threw a cloak over her shoulders, and got ready. As she was advancing to the door, Madame Denis entered. Oh, my dear child, what in heaven's name are you going to do? Madam, said Bathilde, it is necessary that I should go out. Go out. You are mad. No, madam, said Bathilde. I am in perfect possession of my senses, but you would drive me mad by retaining me. But at least where are you going, my dear child? Do you not know that he is condemned? Oh, mon Dieu, mon Dieu. Who told you that? I had asked everyone to keep it from you. Yes. And tomorrow you would have told me that he was dead, and I should have answered, you have killed him, for I had a means of saving him, perhaps. You, my child. You have a means of saving him. I said, perhaps. Let me try the means. It is the only one remaining. Go, my child, said Madame Dennis, struck by the inspired tone of Bathilde's voice. Go, and may God guide you. Bathilde went out, descended the staircase with a slow but firm step, crossed the street, ascended the 4 stories without resting, opened the door of her room, which she had not entered since the day of catastrophe. At the noise which she made, Nanette came out of the inner room and gave a cry at seeing her young mistress. Well, asked Bathilde in a grave tone, what is it, my good Nanette? Oh, mon Dieu, cried the poor woman, trembling. Is that really you, or is it your shadow? It is I, Nanette. I am not yet dead. And why have you left the dentist's house? Have they said anything to wound you? No, Nanette, but I have something to do which is necessary, indispensable. You, go out in your present state. You will kill yourself. M. Buvat, M. Buvat. Here is our young lady going out. Come and tell her that it must not be. Bathilde turned toward Buvat, with the intention of employing her ascendancy over him, if he endeavored to stop her, but she saw him with so sorrowful a face that she did not doubt that he knew the fatal news. On his part, Buvat burst into tears on seeing her. My father, said Bathilde, what has been done today has been the work of men. What remains is in the hands of God, and he will have pity on us. Oh, cried Buvat, sinking into a chair. It is I who have killed him. It is I who have killed him. Bathilde went up to him solemnly and kissed him. But what are you going to do, my child? My duty, answered Bathilde. She opened a little cupboard in the prie-dieu, took out a black pocketbook, opened it, and drew out a letter. You are right. You are right, my child. I have forgotten that letter. I remembered it, answered Bathilde, kissing the letter and placing it next her heart, for it was the sole inheritance my mother left me. At that moment, they heard the noise of a coach at the door. Adieu, father. Adieu, Nanette. Pray for my success. And Bathilde went away, with a solemn gravity which made her, in the eyes of those who watched her, almost a saint. At the door she found Boniface, waiting with a coach. Shall I go with you, Mademoiselle Bathilde? Asked he. No, no, my friend, said Bathilde. Not now. Tomorrow, perhaps. She entered the coach. Where to? Asked the coachman. To the Arsenal. Chapter 41. The 3 Visits. On arriving at the Arsenal, Bathilde asked for Mademoiselle Delaunay, who, at her request, led her at once to Madame de Maine. Ah, it is you, my child, said the Duchess, with a distracted air and voice. It is well to remember one's friends when they are in misfortune. Alas, madam, replied Bathilde, I come to your Royal Highness to speak of one still more unfortunate. Doubtless you may have lost some of your titles, some of your dignities, but their vengeance will stop, for no one would dare to attack the life, or even the liberty, of the son of Louis XIV, or the granddaughter of the great Condé. The life, no, but the liberty, I will not answer for it. Do you know that idiot and Abbé Brigaud has got arrested 3 days ago at Orleans, dressed as a peddler and, on false revelations, which they represented to him as coming from me, has confessed all and compromised us terribly, so that I should not be astonished at being arrested this very day. He for whom I come to implore your pity, madam, has revealed nothing, but, on the contrary, is condemned to death for having kept silence. Ah, my dear child, cried the Duchess, you speak of poor Harmental. He is a gentleman. You know him, then? Alas, said Mademoiselle Delaunay, not only Bathilde knows him, but she loves him. Poor child. But what can I do? I can do nothing. I have no influence. For me to attempt anything in his favor would be to take away from him the last hope remaining. I know it, madam, said Bathilde, and I only ask of your Highness one thing. It is that, through some of your friends or acquaintances, I may gain admission to Monseigneur the Regent. The rest lies with me. My child, do you know what you're asking? Inquired the Duchess. Do you know that the Regent respects no one? Do you know that you are beautiful as an angel, and still more so from your present paleness? Do you know? Madam, said Bathilde with dignity, I know that my father saved his life and died in his service. Ah, That is another thing, said the Duchess. Stay, Delaunay, call Milesius. Mademoiselle Delaunay obeyed, and a moment afterward the faithful Chancellor entered. Milesius, said the Duchess, you must take this child to the Duchesse de Berry, with a recommendation for me. She must see the Regent, and at once. The life of a man depends upon it. It is at a Harmental, whom I would myself give so much to save. I go, madam, said Milesius. You see, my child, said the Duchess, I do all I can for you. If I could be useful to you in any other way, if to prepare his flight or to seduce a jailer, money is needed, I have still some diamonds, which cannot be better employed than in saving the life of so brave a gentleman. Come, lose no time. Go at once to my niece. You know that she is her father's favorite. I know, madam, said Bathilde, that you are an angel, and if I succeed, I shall owe you more than my life. Come, Delaunay, continued Madame de Maine, when Bathilde was gone, let us return to our trunks. Bathilde, accompanied by Milesius, arrived at the Luxembourg in 20 minutes. Thanks to Milesius, Bathilde entered without difficulty. She was conducted into a little boudoir, where she was told to wait while the Chancellor should see Her Royal Highness and inform her of the favor they came to ask. Milesius acquitted himself of the commission with zeal, and Bathilde had not waited 10 minutes when she saw him return with the Duchesse de Berry. The Duchess had an excellent heart, and she had been greatly moved by Milesius' recital, so that, when she appeared, there was no mistaking the interest she already felt in the young girl who came to solicit her protection. Bathilde came to her and would have fallen at her feet, but the Duchess took her by the hand, and kissing her on the forehead, "My poor child," said she, "why did you not come to me a week ago?" "And why a week ago rather than today, madam?" asked Bathilde with anxiety. "Because a week ago I should have yielded to none the pleasure of taking you to my father, and that now is impossible." "Impossible? And why?" cried Bathilde. "Do you not know that I am in complete disgrace since the day before yesterday? Alas! Princess as I am a woman like you, and like you I have had the misfortune to love. We daughters of the royal race, you know, may not dispose of our hearts without the authority of the king and his ministers. I have disposed of my heart, and I have nothing to say, for I was pardoned, but I dispose of my hand, and I am punished. See what strange thing. They make a crime of what in anyone else would have been praised. For 3 days my lover has been my husband, and for 3 days, that is to say, from the moment when I could present myself before my father without blushing, I am forbidden his presence. Yesterday my guard was taken from me. This morning I presented myself at the Palais Royal and was refused admittance. Alas, said Bathilde, I am unhappy, for I had no hope but in you, madam, and I know no one who can introduce me to the regent. And it is tomorrow, madam, at 8 o'clock, that they will kill him whom I love as you love him to Riam. Oh, madam, take pity on me, for if you do not, I am lost. Mon Dieu, Riam, come to our aid, said the Duchess, turning to her husband, who entered at this moment. Here is a poor child who wants to see my father directly, without delay. Her life depends on the interview. Her life, what am I saying? More than her life, the life of a man she loves. Lawson's nephew should never be at a loss. Find us a means, and if it be possible, I will love you more than ever. I have one, said Riam, smiling. Oh, monsieur, cried Bathilde, tell it me, and I will be eternally grateful. Oh, speak, said the Duchesse de Berry, in a voice almost as pressing as Bathilde's. But it compromises your sister singularly. Which one? Mademoiselle de Valois. Agly, how so? Do you not know that there exists a kind of sorcerer who has the power of appearing before her day or night, no one knows how? Richelieu? It is true, cried the Duchesse de Berry. But what, madam? He will not, perhaps. I will beg him so that he will take pity on me, said Bathilde. Besides, you will speak a word for me, will you not? He will not dare to refuse what your highness asks. We will do better than that, said the Duchess. Riam, call Madame de Mouchy, beg her to take Mademoiselle herself to the Duke. Madame de Mouchy is my first lady in waiting, said the Duchess, turning to Bathilde, and it is supposed that the Duc de Richelieu owes her some gratitude. You see, I could not choose you a better introductress. Oh, thanks, madam, cried Bathilde, kissing the Duchess's hands. You are right, and all hope is not yet lost. And you say that the Duc de Richelieu has a means of entering the Palais Royal? Stay, let us understand each other. I do not say so. Report says so. Oh, cried Bathilde, if we only find him a home. That is a chance. But yet, let me see, what time is it? Scarcely 8 o'clock. He will probably sup in town and return to dress. I will tell Madame de Mouchy to wait for him with you. Will you not? Said she, turning to Lady-in-Waiting, who now entered. Wait for the Duke till he returns. I will do whatever your Highness orders, said Madame de Mouchy. Well, I order you to obtain from the Duc de Richelieu a promise that Mademoiselle shall see the Regent, and I authorize you to use, for this purpose, whatever influence you may possess over him. Madame goes a long way, said Madame de Mouchy, smiling. Never mind. Go and do what I tell you. And you, my child, take courage. Follow Madame, and if, on your road in life, you hear much harm of the Duchesse de Berry, whom they anathematize, tell them that I have a good heart, and that, in spite of all these excommunications, I hope that much will be forgiven me, because I have loved much. Is it not so, Riam? I do not know, madam, said Bathilde, whether you are well or ill spoken of, but I know that to me you seem so good and great that I could kiss the trace of your footsteps. Now go, my child. If you miss M. de Richelieu, you may not know where to find him, and may wait for him uselessly. Since her Highness permits it, come, then, madam, said Bathilde, for every minute seems to me an age. A quarter of an hour afterward, Bathilde and Madame de Mouchy were at Richelieu's hotel. Contrary to all expectation, he was at home. Madame de Mouchy entered at once, followed by Bathilde. They found Richelieu occupied with Raff, his secretary, in burning a number of useless letters and putting some others aside. Well, madam, said Richelieu, coming forward with a smile on his lips, what good wind blows you here? And to what event do I owe the happiness of receiving you at my house at 8:30 in the evening? To my wish to enable you to do a good action, Duke. In that case, make haste, madam. Do you leave Paris this evening? No, but I am going tomorrow morning to the Bastille. What joke is this? I assure you it is no joke at all to leave my hotel, where I am very comfortable, for that king, where I shall be just the reverse. I know it, for this will be my third visit. What makes you think you will be arrested tomorrow? I have been warned. By a sure person? Judge for yourself. And he handed a letter to Madame de Mouchy, who took it and read, Innocent or guilty, you have only time to fly. The Regent has just said aloud before me that at last he has got the Duc de Richelieu. Tomorrow you will be arrested. Do you think the person in a position to be well informed? Yes, for I think I recognize the writing. You see, then, that I was right in telling you to make haste. Now, if it is a thing which may be done in the space of a night, speak. I am at your orders. An hour will suffice. Speak. Then, you know I can refuse you nothing. Well, said Madame de Mouchy, the thing is told in a few words. Do you intend this evening to go and thank the person who gave you this advice? Probably, said the Duke, laughing. Well, you must present Mademoiselle to her. Mademoiselle, cried the Duke, astonished, and turning toward Bathilde, who till then had remained hidden in the darkness. And who is Mademoiselle? A young girl who loves the Chevalier de Harmental, who is to be executed tomorrow, as you know, and whose pardon she wishes to ask from the Regent. You love the Chevalier de Harmental, mademoiselle? Said the Duke, addressing Bathilde. Oh, monsieur, stammered Bathilde, blushing. Do not conceal it, mademoiselle. He is a noble young man, and I would give 10 years of my own life to save him. And do you think you have any means of interesting the Regent in his favor? I believe so. It is well. I only hope it may be so. Madam, continued the Duke, turning to Madame de Mouchy, return to her Royal Highness and tell her that Mademoiselle shall see the Regent in an hour. Oh, M. le Duc, cried Bathilde. Decidedly, my dear Richelieu, I begin to think, as people say, that you have made a compact with the devil. that you may pass through keyholes, and I confess I shall be less uneasy now in seeing you go to the Bastille. At any rate, you know, madam, that charity teaches us to visit prisoners, and if you retain any recollection of poor Armand— Silence, Duke, be discreet, and we will see what can be done for you. Meanwhile, you promise that mademoiselle shall see the regent. It is a settled thing. Adieu, Duke, and may the Bastille be easy to you. Is it adieu you say? Au revoir. That is right. And having kissed Madame de Mouchy's hand, he led her to the door. Then, returning to Bathilde, Mademoiselle, said he, what I am about to do for you compromises the reputation and honor of a princess of the blood, but the gravity of the occasion demands some sacrifice. Swear to me, then, that you will never tell, but to one person, for I know there are persons for whom you have no secrets. Swear that you will never tell any but him, and that no other shall ever know in what manner you came to the regent. Monsieur, I swear by all I hold most sacred in the world, by my mother's memory. That will suffice, said the Duke, ringing a bell. A valet de chamber entered. La Fosse, said the Duke, the bay horses in the carriage without arms. Monsieur, said Bathilde, if you would save time, I have a hired carriage below. That is still better. I am at your orders, mademoiselle. Am I to go with monsieur? Asked the servant. No. Stay and help Raff to put these papers in order. There are several which it is quite unnecessary for Du Bois to see. And the Duke offered his arm to Bathilde, went down, handed her into the carriage, and after telling the coachman to stop at the corner of the Rue Saint-Honoré and the Rue de Richelieu, placed himself by her side, as thoughtless as though the fate from which he was about to save the Chevalier might not also await himself. Chapter 42. The Closet. The carriage stopped at its destination, and Richelieu, getting out and taking a key from his pocket, opened the door of a house at the corner of the Rue de Richelieu. I must ask your pardon, mademoiselle, said the Duke, offering his arm to Bathilde, for leading you by badly lighted staircases and passages, but I am anxious not to be recognized, should anyone meet me here. We have not far to go. Bathilde had counted about 20 steps, when the Duke stopped, drew a second key from his pocket, and opened a door, then entered an antechamber and lighted a candle at a lamp on the staircase. Once again I must ask pardon, mademoiselle, said the Duke, but you will soon understand why I chose to dispense with a servant here. It mattered little to Bathilde whether the Duke had a servant or not. She entered the antechamber without replying, and the Duke locked the door behind her. Now follow me, said the Duke, and he walked before the young girl, lighting her with the candle which he held in his hand. They crossed the dining room and drawing room, then entered a bedroom, where the Duke stopped. Mademoiselle, said Richelieu, placing the candle on the chimney-piece, I have your word that you will reveal nothing of what you are about to see. I have given you my promise, and I now renew it. I should be ungrateful indeed if I were to fail. Well, then, be the third in our secret, which is one of love. We put it under the safeguard of love. And the Duc de Richelieu, sliding away a panel in the woodwork, discovered an opening in the wall, beyond which was the back of a closet, and he knocked softly 3 times. Presently they heard a key turn in the lock, then saw a light between planks. Then a low voice asked, Is it you? On the Duke's replying the affirmative, 3 of these planks were quietly detached, opening a means of communication from one room to the other, and the Duke and Bathilde found themselves in the presence of Mademoiselle de Valois, who uttered a cry on seeing her lover accompanied by a woman. Fear nothing, dear Agli, said the Duke, passing into the room where she was, and taking her hand, while Bathilde remained motionless in her place, not daring to move a step till her presence was explained. But will you tell me, began Mademoiselle de Valois, looking at Bathilde uneasily, directly. You have heard me speak of the Chevalier de Harmental, have you not? The day before yesterday you told me that by a word he might save his own life and compromise you all, but that he would never speak this word. Well, he has not spoken, and he is condemned to death, and is to be executed tomorrow. This young girl loves him, and his pardon depends on the regent. Do you understand? Oh, yes, said Mademoiselle de Valois. Come, mademoiselle, said the Duke to Bathilde, taking her by the hand. Then, turning again to the princess, she did not know how to reach your father, my dear Agli, and came to me just as I had received your letter. I had to thank you for the good advice you gave me. And as I know your heart, I thought I should please you by showing my gratitude and offering you an opportunity to save the life of a man to whose silence you probably owe my own. And you were right, Duke. You are welcome, mademoiselle. What can I do for you? I wish to see the regent, said Bathilde, and your highness can take me to him. Will you wait for me, Duke? Asked Mademoiselle de Valois uneasily. Can you doubt it? Then go into the closet, lest anyone should surprise you here. I will take mademoiselle to my father and return directly. I will wait, said the Duke, following the instructions of the princess and entering the closet. Mademoiselle de Valois exchanged some low words with her lover, locked the closet, put the key in her pocket, and holding out her hand to Bathilde. Mademoiselle, said she, all women who love her sisters. Armand and you did well to rely upon me. Come. Bathilde kissed the hand she held out and followed her. They passed through all the rooms facing the Palais Royal, and then, turning to the left, entered those which looked on the Rue de Valois, among which was the regent's bedroom. We have arrived, said Mademoiselle de Valois, stopping before a door, and turning to Bathilde, who at this news trembled and turned pale, for all the strength which had sustained her for the last 3 or 4 hours was ready to disappear just as she needed it the most. Oh, mon Dieu, I shall never dare to speak, said Bathilde. Courage, mademoiselle. Enter. Fall at his feet. God in his own heart will do the rest. At these words, seeing that the young girl still hesitated, she opened the door, pushed Bathilde in, and closed it behind her. She then ran down with a light step to rejoin Richelieu, leaving Bathilde to plead her cause tête-à-tête with the regent. At this unforeseen action, Bathilde uttered a low cry, and the regent, who was walking to and fro with his head bent down, raised it and turned toward Bathilde, who, incapable of making a step in advance, fell on her knees, drew out her letter, and held it toward the regent. The regent had bad sight. He did not understand what was going on, and advanced toward this woman, who appeared to him in the shade as a white and indistinct form. But soon in that form he recognized a woman, and in that woman a young, beautiful, and kneeling girl. As to the poor child, in vain she attempted to articulate a prayer, voice and strength failing her together. She would have fallen if the regent had not held her in his arms. Mon Dieu, mademoiselle, said the regent, on whom the signs of grief produced their ordinary effect. What is the matter? What can I do for you? Come to this couch, I beg. No, monseigneur, it is at your feet that I should be, for I come to ask a boon. And what is it? See first who I am, monseigneur, and then I may dare to speak. And again Bathilde held out the letter, on which rested her only hope, to the Duc d'Orleans. The regent took the letter, and, by the light of a candle which burned on the chimney-piece, recognized his own writing and read as follows. Madam, your husband is dead for France and for me. Neither France nor I can give you back your husband. But remember that if ever you are in want of anything, we are both your debtors. Your affectionate, Philippe d'Orleans. I recognize this letter perfectly as being my own, said the regent, but to the shame of my memory, I must confess that I do not know to whom it was written. Look at the address, monseigneur, said Bathilde, a little reassured by the expression of benevolence on the Duke's face. Clarice du Rocher, cried the regent. Yes, indeed, I remember now. I wrote this letter from Spain after the death of Albert, who was killed at the Battle of Almanza. I wrote this letter to his widow. How did it fall into your hands, mademoiselle? Alas, monseigneur, I am the daughter of Albert and Clarice. You, mademoiselle, and what has become of your mother? She is dead. Long since, nearly 14 years. But happy, doubtless, and wanting nothing. In despair, monseigneur, and wanting everything. But why did she not apply to me? Your highness was still in Spain. Oh, mon Dieu, what do you say? Continue, mademoiselle, for you cannot tell how much you interest me. Poor Clarice, poor Albert, they loved each other so much. I remember. She could not survive him. Do you know that your father saved my life at Nerwinden, mademoiselle? Yes, monseigneur, I know it, and that gave me courage to present myself before you. But you, poor child, poor orphan, what became of you? I, Monseigneur, was taken by a friend of our family, a poor writer called Jean Buvat. Jean Buvat, cried the regent. I know that name. He is the poor copyist who discovered the whole conspiracy, and who some days ago made his demands in person. A place in the library. Was it not? Some arrears due. The same, Monseigneur. Mademoiselle, replied the regent, it appears that those who surround you are destined to save me. I am thus twice your debtor. You said you had a boon to ask of me. Speak boldly. I listen to you. Oh, my God, murmured Bathilde. Give me strength. Is it, then, a very important and difficult thing that you desire? Monseigneur, said Bathilde, it is the life of a man who has deserved death. Is it the Chevalier de Harmental? Alas, Monseigneur, it is. The regent's brow became pensive, while Bathilde, seeing the impression produced by her demand, felt her heart beat and her knees tremble. Is he your relation, your ally, your friend? He is my life, he is my soul, Monseigneur. I love him. But do you know that if I pardon him, I must pardon all the rest, and that there's some still more guilty than he is? His life only, Monseigneur, all I ask is that he may live. But if I change his sentence to a perpetual imprisonment, you will never see him again. What will become of you, then? Asked the regent. Bathilde was obliged to support herself by the back of a chair. I would enter into a convent, where I could pray the rest of my life for you, Monseigneur, and for him. That cannot be, said the regent. Why not, Monseigneur? Because this very day, this very hour, I have been asked for your hand, and have promised it. You have promised my hand, Monseigneur, and to whom? Read, said the regent, taking an open letter from his desk, and presenting it to the young girl. Raoul's writing, cried Bathilde. What does this mean? Read, repeated the regent, and in a choking voice, Bathilde read the following letter. Monseigneur, I have deserved death, I know it, and I do not ask you for life. I am ready to die at the day and hour appointed. But it depends on your highness to make this death sweeter to me. I love a young girl whom I should have married if I had lived. Grant that she may be my wife before I die, in leaving her forever alone and friendless in the world. Let me at least have the consolation of giving her the safeguard of my name and fortune. On leaving the church, Monseigneur, I will walk to the scaffold. This is my last wish, my sole desire. Do not refuse the prayer of a dying man. Raoul de Harmental. Oh, Monseigneur, said Bathilde, sobbing, you see that while I thought of him, he thought of me. Am I not right to love him when he loves me so much? Yes, said the regent, and I grant his request. It is just, may it, as he says, sweeten his last moments. Monseigneur, cried the young girl, is that all you grant him? You see, said the regent, he asks nothing else. Oh, it is cruel, it is frightful, to see him again and lose him directly. His life, Monseigneur's life, I beg, and let me never see him again, better so. Mademoiselle, said the regent, in a tone which admitted of no reply, and writing some lines on a paper which he sealed. Here is a letter to Monsieur de Launay, the governor of the Bastille. It contains my instructions with regard to the prisoner. My captain of the guards will go with you, and see that my instructions are followed. Oh, his life, Monseigneur, his life. On my knees, in the name of heaven, I implore you. The regent rang the bell. A valet entered. Call Monsieur the Marquis de la Fère, he said. Oh, Monseigneur, you are cruel, said Bathilde, rising. At least permit me then to die with him. We will not be separated, even on the scaffold. We will be together, even in the tomb. Monsieur de la Fère, accompany Mademoiselle to Bastille, said the regent. Here is a letter from Monsieur de Launay. Read it with him, and see that the orders it contains are punctually executed. Then, without listening to Bathilde's last cry of despair, the Duc d'Orléans opened the door of a closet and disappeared. Chapter 43. The Marriage in Extremis. La Fère dragged the young girl away, almost fainting, and placed her in one of the carriages always standing in the courtyard of the Palais Royal. During the rout, Bathilde did not speak. She was cold, dumb, and inanimate as a statue. Her eyes were fixed and tearless, but on arriving at the fortress, she started. She fancied she had seen in the shade, in the very place where the Chevalier de Rohan was executed, something like a scaffold. A little further, a sentinel cried, "Convive!" The carriage rolled over a drawbridge and drew up at the door of the governor's house. A footman out of livery opened the door, and Lefebvre gave Bathilde his arm. She could scarcely stand. All her strength had left her when hope left her. Lefebvre and the valet were obliged almost to carry her to the first floor. Delaunay was at supper. They took Bathilde into a room to wait, while Lefebvre went directly to the governor. 10 minutes passed, during which Bathilde had only one idea, that of eternal separation which awaited her. The poor girl saw but one thing, her lover on the scaffold. Lefebvre re-entered with the governor. Bathilde looked at them with a bewildered air. Lefebvre approached her and offering her his arm. "Mademoiselle," said he, "the church is prepared. The priest is ready." Bathilde, without replying, rose and leaned on the arm which was offered her. Delaunay went first, lighted by 2 men bearing torches. As Bathilde entered by one of the side doors, she saw entering by the other the Chevalier de Harmental, accompanied by Valef and Pompadour. These were his witnesses, as Delaunay and Lefebvre were hers. Each door was kept by 2 of the French guard, silent and motionless as statues. The 2 lovers advanced, Bathilde pale and fainting, Raoul calm and smiling. On arriving before the altar, the Chevalier took Bathilde's hand, and both fell on their knees, without having spoken a word. The altar was lighted only by 4 wax tapers, which threw a funereal light over the chapel, already dark and filled with gloomy recollections. The priest commenced the ceremony. He was a fine old man with white hair, and whose melancholy countenance showed the traces of his daily functions. He had been chaplain of the Bastille for 25 years, and had heard many sad confessions and seen many lamentable events. He spoke to them, not, as usual, of their duties as husband and wife, but of divine mercy and eternal resurrection. At the benediction, Bathilde laid her head on Raoul's shoulder. The priest thought she was fainting and stopped. "Finish, my father," murmured Bathilde. The priest pronounced the sacramental words, to which both replied by a yes, which seemed to unite the whole strength of their souls. The ceremony finished, Harmental asked Delaunay if he might spend his few remaining hours with his wife. Monsieur Delaunay replied that there was no objection. Raoul embraced Pompadour and Valef, thanked them for having served as witnesses at his marriage, pressed Lefebvre's hand, thanked Monsieur Delaunay for his kindness to him during his imprisonment, and throwing his arm round Bathilde, led her away by the door through which he had entered. When they reached Harmental's room, Bathilde could no longer contain her tears. A despairing cry escaped her lips, and she fell weeping on a chair, where doubtless Harmental had often sat during the 3 weeks of his captivity, and thought of her. Raoul threw himself at her feet and tried to console her, but was himself so much moved by her grief that his own tears mingled with hers. This heart of iron melted in its turn, and Bathilde felt at once on her lips the tears and kisses of her lover. They had been about half an hour together, when they heard steps approaching the door and a key turning in the lock. Bathilde started and pressed Harmental convulsively against her heart. Raoul understood the dreadful fear which crossed her mind, and reassured her. It could not be what she dreaded, since the execution was fixed for 8 o'clock in the morning, and 11 had only just struck. It was Monsieur Delaunay who appeared. "Monsieur le Chevalier," said he, "have the kindness to follow me." "Alone?" asked Harmental, clasping Bathilde in his arms. "No, with Madame," replied the governor. "Oh, together, Raoul, together," cried Bathilde. "Were they like, so that we are together?" "We are ready, monsieur, we are ready." Raoul kissed Bathilde again. Then, recalling all his pride, he followed Delaunay with a face which showed no trace of the terrible emotion he had experienced. They passed through some ill-lighted corridors, descended a spiral staircase, and found themselves at the door of a tower. This door opened out to a yard, surrounded by high walls, which served as a promenade to those prisoners who were not kept secret. In this courtyard was standing a carriage with 2 horses, on one of which was a postilion, and they saw, shining in the darkness, the cuirasses of a dozen musketeers. A ray of hope crossed the minds of the 2 lovers. Bathilde had asked the regent to change Raoul's death into a perpetual imprisonment. Perhaps the regent had granted him this favor. The carriage, ready, doubtless, to conduct him to some state prison. The musketeers destined to escort them all gave to the supposition an air of reality. They raised their eyes to heaven to thank God for this unexpected happiness. Meanwhile, Delaunay had signed to the carriage to approach. The postilion had obeyed. The door was opened, and the governor, with his head uncovered, held his hand to Bathilde to assist her into the carriage. She hesitated an instant, turning uneasily to see that they did not take Raoul away by the other side. But seeing that he was ready to follow her, she got in without resistance. An instant afterward, Raoul was sitting by her. The door was closed, and both carriage and escort passed through the gate over the drawbridge, and they found themselves outside of the Bastille. They threw themselves into each other's arms. There was no longer any doubt. The regent granted Harmental his life, and what was more, consented not to separate him from Bathilde. This was what Bathilde and Harmental had never dared to hope. This life of seclusion, a punishment to many, would be to them a paradise of love. They would be together, and what else did they desire for their future, even when they were masters of their own fate? A single sad idea crossed their minds, and both, with the sympathy of hearts who love, pronounced the name of Beauvat. At this moment the carriage stopped. At such a time everything was, for the lovers, a subject of fear. They again trembled, lest they should have given way too much to hope. The door opened. It was a postilion. "What do you want?" asked Harmental. "I want to know where I am to take you." "Where you are to take me. Have you no orders?" "My orders were to take you to the Bois de Vincennes, between the chateau and Nogent-sur-Marne, and here we are." "And where's the escort?" asked Harmental. "Oh, the escort left us at the barrier." "Oh, mon Dieu!" cried Harmental, while Bathilde, panting with hope, joined her hands in silence. "Is it possible?" And the Chevalier jumped out of the carriage, looked round him anxiously, then clasping Bathilde in his arms, they uttered together a cry of joy and thankfulness. They were free as the air they breathed, but the regent had ordered that they should be taken to the very place where Harmental had carried off Bourguignon, mistaking him for himself. This was the only revenge of Philippe le Debonair. For years after this event, Beauvat, reinstated in his place, and with his arrears paid, had the satisfaction of placing a pen in the hand of a fine boy of 3 years old. He was the son of Raoul and Bathilde. The two first names which the child wrote were Albert du Rocher and Clarice Gray. The third was that of Philippe d'Orleans, Regent of France. Postscriptum. Perhaps some persons may have taken sufficient interest in those who have played a secondary part in our history to wish to know what became of them after the events which lost the conspiracy and saved the regent. We will satisfy them in a few words. The Duc and Duchesse de Maine, whose plotting they wished to stop in the future, were arrested. The Duke at Sceaux, and the Duchess in her house in the Rue Saint-Honoré. The Duke was taken to the Chateau of Doullens, and the Duchess to that of Dijon, and afterward to the citadel of Chalons. Both left at the end of a few months, disarming the regent, one by an absolute denial, the other by a complete avowal. Richelieu was arrested, as Mademoiselle de Valois had warned him, the day after that on which he had procured Bathilde's interview with the regent, but his captivity was a new triumph for him. It was reported that the handsome prisoner had obtained permission to walk on the terrace of the Bastille. The Rue Saint-Antoine was filled with most elegant carriages, and became, in 24 hours, the fashionable promenade. The regent, who declared that it proofs of the treason of M. de Richelieu, sufficient to lose him 4 heads if he had them, would not, however, risk his popularity with the fair sex by keeping him long in prison. Richelieu, again at liberty, after a captivity of 3 months, was more brilliant and more sought after than ever. But the closet had been walled up, and Mademoiselle de Valois became Duchesse de Medina. The Abbé Brigaud, arrested, as we have said, at Orleans, was kept for some time in the prison of that town, to the great despair of Madame Denis and her children. But one fine morning, as they were sitting down to breakfast, the Abbé entered, as calm as ever. They asked him a number of questions, but, with his habitual prudence, he referred them to his judicial declarations, saying that the affair had already given him so much trouble that they would greatly oblige him by never speaking of it any more. Now, as the Abbé Brigaud was quite an autocrat in Madame Denis's establishment, his desire was religiously respected, and from that day the affair was as completely forgotten in the Rue du Temps Perdu as if it had never existed. Some days afterward, Pompadour, Volif, Laval, and Milesius went out of prison in their turn, and began again to pay their court to Madame de Maine, as if nothing had happened. As to the Cardinal de Polignac, he was not even arrested. He was simply exiled to his abbey d'Anchin. These proofs of clemency appeared to Dubois so out of all reason that he came to the regent, intending to make a scene about it. But the regent only replied by repeating the burden of the song which St. Simon had made on him. This enraged Dubois so much that the regent, in order to pacify him, was obliged to transform him into His Eminence the Cardinal. End of the conspirators.